I should not be. No. Let's make sure. I am. Okay. I am muted. You hear me? Yeah? Can you hear me? Really? That computer? Oh, oh gosh.
One, two. Testing, one, two.
I was wondering, Enrico, I told Omar about that, about 1 and 20 from TCID. If I look at GMA, it so happens that all of the GMA representatives are in 1 and 2X. 1 and 2 makes sense in Europe, probably
Yep.
more than in the US where you guys can start the police and I don't care about standards.
Okay.
Plus Deutsche Telekom at least and
Test.
Orange are quite active in the workshops and in the prototyping. I don't know too much about TIM, but would it be a good idea that each of you four guys
Testing. Thank you very much.
Bryan and do give some meat to GSM to GMA, which is just a thin layer of marketing.
Testing. Testing.
Okay, of course. I didn't know about that. Was to counter Jasper. Fairly straightforward, I understand. But even so, Ericsson is in 1 and 2 and 2, but not the same people.
What is, nevertheless, it could be a trend that in the sense that GMA client is a more bigger.
Yeah, because everyone now, okay, at the beginning, you could say, okay, it's only the beginning, but now, I mean...
Yes, at the beginning, I think that it was important to push GCIA.
Yeah.
But maybe now we are also
think about it.
I also to understand because I see that there is this intelligent service that we can use more because
Okay.
we have all the
okay. In Italy, yes. I remember there was an Olivetti shop down the road in France.
No, but really, apart from buying the logo of Sullivan, I think that Olivetti
Ah, okay.
Sure. Okay, everybody listening, come on in, have a seat. We're about to get started. Somebody back there wave the rest of them on in. Okay. Good. Right. Got it. Okay, so I was told to get going at 5:25, so we're going to get started. Hopefully everybody will come on in as soon as they can. So welcome everybody to this seminar on the bridging the gap between standards and developers in the IoT space. My name is Bryan Sullivan. I work for AT&T inside the AT&T Domain 2.0 architecture and planning team. We work on what you may have heard of as the Domain 2.0 strategy, the AT&T integrated cloud architecture, and open source activities. I'm the board vice chair of the Open Mobile Alliance. Been involved in Open Mobile Alliance for a long time, and I really want to thank the 1M2M organization for co-hosting this event with us, this successful meeting week and the test fest that we have going on, and including tomorrow. What we're going to do is we're going to have a number of speakers come up, and we're going to have a discussion panel at the end. So I'd ask everybody to hold your questions to the end. We're going to have about 15 minutes per speaker, and we're going to try to move through them, and then we're going to take questions, I believe, at the end of the talks, and then we're going to have a discussion panel, and we can have questions after the discussion panel. We'll see how that goes. Everybody who's on the webinar, please, if you have questions, collect them, submit them through the chat panel. We will read them. And read them out for you after the talks as questions from the audience. So with that, I just wanted to give you a brief overview of the agenda. We're going to start with Dr. Omar Illumi, and we're going to follow with a number of other speakers, and I'll introduce each one as we get ready for the talk. And then we're going to have the panel. So just a couple brief words about this intersection of standards and developers. This diagram you see on the slide is a way I've represented the interaction of a variety of things that I've been involved in my career. I've had a variety of roles, including service development, service architecture, development of platforms which enable the services that we deploy for those services, and then the development of standards that guided the vendors and the service providers in developing interoperable platforms. With all of this in the interest of serving the people in the middle, of course, who are the customers. The new aspect, relatively new aspect of this interaction is the role of open source in developing the platforms, providing the platforms, and as well probably in services as well as at the application layer. We're involved right now heavily in the development of the network function virtualization platform through the open platform for NFV. This is based upon Open Daylight, which you probably have heard, which has a program focused on Internet of Things, as well as OpenStack and a variety of other network function infrastructure open source projects. And together with the Open Mobile Alliance, we're trying to figure out how, and ETSI Network Function Virtualization organization, we're trying to figure out how we can collaborate best, deliver solutions in an agile way that meet market demands quickly. And so really looking forward to the discussions we have here today. So first I'd like to introduce Dr. Omar Alumi, who is Alcatel-Lucent, he works for Alcatel-Lucent Bell Labs. He is the technical plenary chair of ATIS. And his presentation is one M2M interworking and the semantics framework.
So actually, I'm the technical plenary chair of 1M2M, and our membership is via ATIS to 1M2M.
There you go. Okay, thank you for clarifying that. So, Dr. Lermy, please.
So, thank you very much for the opportunity to speak. I think the timing is very good, and not only the timing is very good, I think the synergies between 1M2M and OMA are real synergies. In 1M2M, we have been using products in terms of standard products for OMA, in particular OMA DM, and we have a new work item on lightweight M2M interworking. The title of this session, I think it's bridging the gap between developers and standards. It's not quite the focus of my presentation. I'm making a general presentation about 1M2M and some features of 1M2M. But you spoke about Open Daylight, and it happens that Open Daylight has an extension based on 1M2M. It's being championed by Cisco. It's under the Linux Foundation. Now, even though in 1M2M we don't do open source per se, because we don't have the provisions for open source, our members are engaged in several open source implementations. We are aware at least of maybe 3 or 4 open source. One is called OM2M in Linux Foundation, the Open Daylight in Eclipse Foundation, the Linux Foundation Open Daylight, as well as Ocean, which is a Korean open source implementation. So let me tell you a little bit about 1M2M.
There's a control.
So 1M2M is a partnership project. Its setting is very close to 3GPP. Initially, those organizations were working, so the ones which you have on the top were working on machine-to-machine and IoT separately, and they decided to join forces and create a single place where they can develop jointly standards for IoT and M2M. And in addition to those, ETSI and ATIS, etc., there is a number of what we call partner type 2, like OMA is one of them, who joined also the initiative, and they have the means to contribute. Some other organizations like Global Platform, they provide security, the Home Gateway Initiative, the Broadband Forum, and so it's we have very rich ecosystem, 200 members. This is providing a little snapshot about some of our members. So you can see that we cover a large variety of actors from the device all the way to the applications, the system integrators, the network vendors, the operators, etc. So what is it? So it's a software layer. When we say software layer, it's really about a largely distributed system. We think that IoT is not a centralized system, it's largely distributed, which means that you could have intelligence virtually anywhere, be it in the device, in the gateways, in the cloud. It sits between applications and the network. And it basically provides an abstraction layer, and we abstract the network, we abstract several other things like the different technology, the OIC, the all-seen, the lightweight M2M, and we provide a single API towards application developers. And I will say further words about this. What we specify is really the APIs, or the interfaces, or the reference points. Whoever you are speaking to, you may use different terms. And so we have three kinds of APIs, the ones towards northbound, towards the applications, and it's device, it's gateway, it's cloud. Towards the network, and this is a particular area where there are clear synergies with the work on network APIs being provided by OMA, and across the service layer, so the horizontal interfaces across the service layer, between the service layer, in order to ship the data, to do device management, to perform security, etc. So our vision is the one that you should see on this slide, which is to move from the left-hand side of the slide, which is almost a single device, dedicated network, one application, to the right-hand side of the picture, where we group functions which are common to multiple applications. I think you can think about device management, you can think about data collection, data aggregation, security, location, just to name a few, and put them available by means of APIs to applications. And this is extremely important because at the end of the day, the IoT is not about one application. I think the IoT is about application and device proliferation. I think if you build the IoT with few use cases in mind, I think it's not going to scale. You have to build it to allow any use case to work with your infrastructure. And you have to build it to basically to allow device and application proliferation. Now, in this service layer, what we do is we bridge the gap between the physical world, which are the things, and we make representation, digital representations. That's what you see. Is there a pointer? No pointer. So what we do, the things, so the articles, the barcodes, or whatever, we make digital representations in the service layer, which means you can now act on those from the applications. One important thing that's enabled by the right-hand side of the picture is we really think that IoT is about any-to-any communication. So any device to any application. It's not collect once, consume once. It's collect once and consume multiple times. Of course, it doesn't mean that it's a free lunch for everyone to consume anything. It means that we can make any-to-any communication, but we restrict this based on access control policies. So in terms of our architecture, we call the AEs the application elements, entities which are either in devices or middle nodes or infrastructure. The NSEs are the network service entity. Those are about network services. It could be location. And the layer that we specified, we call it the common service entity, which is the layer where we provide the value-added feature that we expose to the application, and it provides the abstraction layer towards the network. And we specify basically those interfaces, the MCA, so M from M to M, from CSE to AE, so the north interface, the south interface to the network, the MCN, and the horizontal interface, we call it the MCC, and there is a variant when we cross different administrative domains or service provider domains, we call it MCC prime. So, in terms of collaboration, I think we came to the conclusion that one of the problems of IoT is how do we abstract all those technologies, the all-seen alliance, the open interconnect, the OMA, the ZigBee, etc. So we actually have reached out to several organizations, and we have a number of interworkings. For instance, an interworking with open interconnect, with the all-seen alliance, OIC and all-seen. We do have also an interworking with OMA for the lightweight M2M. Our vision is that we want to expose a single North API towards application developer that abstracts all those technologies. So if you register a lightweight M2M endpoint and make the data available, it will be consumed in a seamless fashion, like very similar to the way we consume resources from all CNA lines. We are having some further discussion. We use protocols from IETF, CoAP, and HTTP, and the security. MQTT is also a possible binding, but we do have also discussion with the 3GPP on the interworking with 3GPP release 11 and release 13. So I want to focus on two things, two features, and I would like to show the motivation for which they are extremely important. So those are interworking and semantic interoperability. And I take this based on one example from smart cities. So what you have on the left-hand side of this slide is a vision for the different possible segments or applications for smart city. It's from Frost and Sullivan. And the most important point of this is the kind of link between those within at the center of this figure, which means so two or 3 years ago you would go to a smart city workshop. You will see that people speak about different verticals within the city. Now, the key point of smart city of how you make a superior value proposition, but by communicating data between those different verticals. It's extremely important. So, and on the right-hand side of the figure, it's a small vision about how you proceed for smart cities. So what you need to do is you need to basically start with the initial set of use case to build the vision. What are your objectives? Then second step, you start putting the sensors, digitalize and sensorize, we call this, even though it doesn't exist in the dictionary. There you don't expect that a single technology for connecting your sensor fits all. You will see yourselves mixing and matching different flavors of technology. It could be cellular, it could be LoRa, it could be Sigfox, whatever, or short range Zigbee. Which means you have to abstract all of those. You have to deal with all of those. And since we are speaking about bridging the gap, so our vision is to provide the building blocks that make all those networks seamless, look seamless towards the application developer. Then you build dashboard, and then what you do is you expand the vision by integration and innovation. Integration, you start integrating the different platforms or the different applications, make them talk to each other. And innovation, it's about enabling applications, new applications yet that you maybe you didn't even think of when you built your smart city infrastructure. So, so there are two challenges here. One is the integration, and here I want to speak about the role of open platforms. So what you have in the left-hand side is from a project called the Crystal Project. It's a European project. And this tells you about the complexity of integration between applications. So if you are doing point-to-point integration between applications, you will have n-square complexity because you have application A with B, application A with C, etc. You can choose one software platform, enterprise service bus or whatever, and provide that provides that integration facility, but that will mean that you are there is a form of locking to a single platform vendor. We think with what we did with M2M, we can provide a much superior value proposition because we base our integration, and we think we have a platform that allows applications to each other in an open, standardized manner. In addition to that, that includes the interworking between with the underlying networks, and it includes the interworking with different devices or different technologies. In terms of integration, one thing that we came across during our work is what we call semantic interoperability. So what I said before is that the IoT is about making digital representations of the thing, of the real world. It's a digital representation of the physical world. In the first release of 1M2M, so we make those resources which store the data, but there was an assumption that the application that consume the data or the application that produce the data, they have some a priori knowledge about the meaning of that data. And with release 2, we think we have a way to go beyond this limitation. We don't need those applications to know the meaning of the data, a priori knowledge of the data, and it's achieved by means of semantics. So the vision is that it's incremental vision. So we store the data and then we enrich the data by means of metadata. And metadata will contain information that allows you to know what's the meaning of the data, and those metadata are instantiations of what we call ontologies. So ontology would be the set of concepts and the relationships between the concepts that allows you to describe the meaning of the data. So we have a RESTful architecture. So what you see in the common service layer is the representation of the different things. Everything is stored under resource, and the resources now will be enriched with metadata, which provides semantics. So which means we can have easier integration because you can discover the data, you can discover the meaning of the data, and you can consume the data. Of course, it assumes that you need to have the access rights to consume those data. I'm running out of time, right? Okay, and in terms of innovation, I think this is about the potential for new applications development. So the benefit of platform is what we call the long tail for applications. There will be multiple applications that you didn't even think of for IoT, and we want to enable this vision. So what's going on? Oh, thank you. So again, so in terms of innovation, we allow the innovation because we open the APIs to the app developers, and the APIs will hide the specificity of interworking, be it for different technologies like whole scene, lightweight M2M or whatever, and the network as well. So how our interworking works. So this is providing an example for the interworking with the different technologies. So we have one building blocks called the IPE, which is the interworking proxy entity, which is special application that will talk to the head end of an LCNL lines or continuous halter lines or a lightweight M2M server. And this IPE will represent devices or methods in our common service entity, which is the orange entity there. And that means that the application entity in the cloud will can discover resources pertaining to all those technologies using a single API, which is MCA, and all those technologies will be abstracted under one M2M resources. So we have a seamless access to those resources, and we can basically make those or interact with all those networks in almost seamless fashion. This slide was presented, which is showing the interworking example with 3GPP. So right now, the right-hand side of the picture is how our service platform can use or make service of services exposed by the network, such as location or device triggering. But this is a particular case where we are heavily relying and we are waiting for output from OMA, because OMA is developing the APIs, the North APIs for the networks, and our plan is to consume those APIs and make use of those APIs. So it's a joint effort between ourselves, yourselves, and 3GPP. So we are waiting for the output from your side. I will skip this. One M2M progressed two aspects of interworking, the underlying network interworking and the device or technology interworking. We think that they are extremely important to expedite the application development because we hide all those specificities. We use in one M2M, whenever we can use or use from other standards, we do. And in particular, it's particularly true for the case of OMA, because we reuse APIs from OMA and we reuse the lightweight M2M as an interworking in the context of our interworking framework. I think this is maybe a personal statement, but I think OMA did a great job. In particular, and the parts which are extremely important from our side are device management, network APIs, and the recent development pertaining to lightweight M2M. And so we are fully engaged together, and we wish that we continue this engagement. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Lumi. So now we're going to have Nicholas Damour come up, who's Senior Manager, Business Innovation Development at Sierra Wireless, and he's going to talk about close encounters of the seventh kind.
Thank you. Hi, good evening, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. So, close encounters of the seventh kind. So, how do we perform interspecies breeding between developers and standards developers? So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're doing in that respect in Sierra Wireless, and also about my experience in standards in 1M2M. So before I do that, that's the pointer. Okay. Too far. All right. So for those of you who may not know Sierra Wireless, so just one slide to explain what we do. We're mostly known in the IoT space for building cellular modules, IoT modules, but we also do gateways. And we try every often a little bit of new stuff, new innovation stuff. So sometimes it works. In 2003, Sierra Wireless released a phone, a short-lived phone inspired by another Canadian company doing business phones with keyboards. It didn't work out so well, but that's the life of innovation. More recently, we started doing connectivity services, so selling actual SIM cards with our IoT modules and with our M2M platform. So right now we're really trying to have a full offering covering the end-to-end IoT space. And for that, we are very involved in standards. So in terms of connectivity, we were always doing that. And for a couple of years now, we're involved in 1M2M. We've been very involved in lightweight M2M on the standard side, but also on the development side. And that's what I'm going to talk about. So this innovation trend is about developers first and foremost, because when you talk about information technology and when we talk about the Internet of Things, without developers, there's just nothing. They're the ones who are building the world of the IoT. So you need the developers to build products. You need developers to build solutions on top of your products. But also the other thing that you need are standards. Standards could be top-down standards. It could be de facto standards. I've got here a couple of organizations, standards development organizations. Without standards, I would dare to say that there would be no information technology at all, because information technology, as the name says, is all about exchanging information. So you need to find one way or another to understand yourself, each other. So you need to have those standards at all sorts of layers, starting from the connectivity to the service layer. Omar talked a little bit about semantics as well. So standards are very important for the information technology to be able to operate and to serve its purpose. Now, we've got the standards development organizations such as OMA, we've got 1M2M, we've got a couple of them. The IATF, of course, is very well known as well. And the people doing the standards are not often the people actually using the standards, the developers. So tonight's topic is to see how to bridge that gap and how we do that in our own experience at Sierra Wireless. So very often, and we can see that in our own company as well, in previous companies I've been working for, you've got organizations that do the standards in their own ivory tower sometimes, that's a perception at least sometimes, and you've got the developers, the people who actually have to implement the standards. And, well, the relationship between the two may not be always ideal. The standards come from heaven, more or less, and the developers, they have to cope with, well, whatever is in there, even if it's not completely useful. That's a standard, so that's how it should be done. And it's also because it's not the same mindset. Some people are more interested, you could argue, in a more theoretical approach, and some people are more interested in a hands-on approach. And the challenge for both of these worlds really is for standards organizations to get closer to the developers because they need that feedback so that the standards actually live. How many standards are stored in some cupboard somewhere and never were used by anyone? So the standards really need the developer world. And on the other hand, of course, when the developers figure out that something's not good in the standard, they need a standard also. They need to give feedback to the standards development organization and to be able to talk to other companies. Like I said, without standards, there would be no information technology at all. So standards are unavailable in some way. So that's a pretty sad view. Now, maybe a better view, a more energetic view, would be to say how I was talking about interbreeding standards developers with standards implementer, how to make them collide and create some innovation and improve standards and improve implementations of the standards. So that's a goal, really, being able to bring the developers and the standards together and to iterate on that cycle over and over and over, as has been done in other fields as well. Again, I was quoting the IATF. So in the IoT space, I think that's what we need to do. We need to get those two worlds closer together, and the Open Mobile Alliance is doing that fairly well. 1M2M is doing that fairly well as well. And that's really where we should focus, trying to get those guys together so that the standards get better and more useful for the actual solution builder. So, first challenge to do that is to bring more people on board. So to foster proliferation of developers, of standards makers as well, and to bring all those people together, to exchange ideas, to make them collide. The more you have, the more collisions you get, obviously. The more heat you get sometimes as well, but that's good heat. So how do you manage those communities in the end? How do you foster that proliferation in a healthy and, I would say, not conflictuous way somehow? So I would argue to say, well, the very first thing is to realize that all of that is around people. I mean, we're talking a lot about IT and technology, but in the end, the people who meet, I mean, the developers and the standards people, on the other hand, over the years, they build strong personal relationships. They're just people. So you need to manage, you need to build those people communities, to build them strong, to make them communicate, meet and exchange. So through online communication tools, of course. We're in the technology field, so we should know how to use those tools. We do it. But also to make them meet face-to-face together. I mean, today's event is a very good example. I mean, we could meet the whole week, but at the same time, I mean, we've got this webinar going on at the same time, reaching out outside of this room. So we have to make those people meet and exchange, but also another very important part is to let those people experiment. Because if you don't have this experimentation, it kind of remains a little bit theoretical. and it doesn't go anywhere really. So what you need for that is an easy access to hardware tools. I mean, the Internet of Things is about things. So you really need hardware, easy access, and we're going to see that tomorrow during the workshop. So you need hardware to experiment. So development kits on the hardware level, and you also need the same thing on the software level. You need development kits, developer tools, whatever you call them, those tools to be installed on that hardware, and you need to let people try some stuff, modify them, kill them, play around with them. And for that, open source is really a great tool because that's really what it's been designed to do. You just give something out, and then you let people play with it, and they don't have to really argue or think about what financial consequences, what legal consequences. To some extent, at least, they don't have to worry too much about that, and they can change stuff. I mean, open source, regardless of the license issues, it's open. They can look at it, they can change it, and they can experiment. Again, the goal is to experiment. So I would argue that the very important thing for standards development organizations, but also for companies, is to build those communities, to bring them together, and to give them the tools to play, and just sit back and watch what happens, more or less. So, at Sierra Wireless, it's what we've been doing for a couple of years. So, building strong people communities. So, like I was saying, one of these elements is to build online tools for to give information as much as possible. Very often that also means writing a lot of boring documentation, unfortunately. But that's really what you need to do. You need to give the tools, to give the fora, the blogs, whatever online community tool you can have to bring those people on board. So I have the example inside the company, but for the standards development organization, it's exactly the same. And we know we've got our portals as SDOs, we've got our blogs, we've got our GitHub accounts, so that's exactly the kind of thing we need to have. So online communities, but also we need to bring them together. So make people meet and exchange regularly, make them collide physically, they build relationship. You know that very often on mailing list exchanges, especially among experts, can get a little heated. People will entrench themselves and no, you need to do this, you need to do that, and in the end, well, maybe no one really cares. And so what's very important is to let these people come together, meet, have a beer together, and or a glass of milk, whatever, and just milk and get friendships in the end. So managing those people, again, it's all about having people working on the same things together. Different angle of view, but bringing together and letting them experiment. Experimentation, so the open source. Open source is very important too. Like I said, with open source, so open hardware or open software, you can let the people have a look at it, change it, experiment, and again, it's a very important tool for organizations, be it standards organizations or companies. It's very, very important to use open source as a means to let people try out stuff and have new ideas, collide, and then foster innovation. So we're going to have examples of that tomorrow, again, at the workshop. So I believe we're going to have some Arduino hardware and some Mango hardware from Sierra Wireless as well. Plus, of course, so that the hardware layer and, again, the software layer. We're going to have the open source implementations of Lightway M2M and also the commercial ones. And we're going to have collisions, again, very important. So, again, trying to bridge that gap. So once you've done that, you've got lots of collisions, lots of people moving around and having ideas and colliding. At some point, yes, you need to converge again, because it's good to have some ideas everywhere, but you need to converge again. And that's exactly the role of standards organizations. Sometimes that process is a little bit difficult, painful. People need to make some compromise. But in the end, you can see some ideas coalesce together, and this convergence process to come to, well, a standard, which is what we're trying to do. So you do that, repeat. So I'm just quoting 3GPP, 1M2M or OMA as examples. Again, there are lots of organizations out there doing that. And you just take that formula and you do it. You could do that, so as you can do it in the company's world, you can do it in the standards world. So test beds, I talked about that, open source, same thing. And well, the idea in our experience at least, so if I take the experience I have within Sierra, and it's probably the same, I know, of a bunch of companies with very separated divisions between the people who do standards and the people who do development. Even inside the companies you have that. So, well, you need to put those people together, and they may not always agree, and they may not always have the same sense of interest, but you make them collide, coalesce, and then you iterate over and over and over again. And that's at least one recipe I would have for you tonight to try to bridge that gap between developers and standards. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicholas. So now we're going to invite up Benjamin Cabet, who's an IoT evangelist at Eclipse Foundation and co-founded the Eclipse Internet of Things Working Group.
Thank you. Thank you, actually, Nicola, for the great introduction. We're going to dive a bit deeper into what open source means and we were actually going to look at some success stories of open source in the past and how you can use and leverage open source for building the Internet of Things. A quick look at the Internet in the 90s, right? Those companies. They're not around anymore, right? At the time, the internet was great. You could still do, internet instant messaging and emails and whatnot. Only if you were a computer user, it was very unlikely that you would and could talk to people using AOL. Why is that? Well, they were basically using technologies that were not necessarily open standards, and what's more, they were not using open source. It's only until we actually had open standards like FTP, HTTP, and whatnot, and open source that not only we've come to a point where we have a true an interoperable internet, and what's more, people actually building solution to almost point earlier, people that nobody would have thought about, right? And today, it's very unlikely that you will find internet solution based on proprietary software. At least the infrastructure of the internet runs on open source, runs on Linux, runs on Apache, and of course the open standards from IETF and W3C and whatnot. The world of IoT and M2M, I won't paraphrase the previous speakers, right? But it's essentially we lack, or until very recently we were lacking the open standards. We're getting there. How about the open source implementations, right? There's just so many existing solutions that are silos, right? That are like, if I were to build a solution on top of Nest, great, I can use the data from the Nest and start trying to figure out how to build a nice mobile app making use of the data, but it's essentially very, very limited. What if, thanks to open standards and open source, I were to essentially just build a bigger pie, just like what the good old internet is at the moment. There's really lots of barriers to entry for the Internet of Things, and the main, I guess, the main issue is that it's complicated. What I mentioned earlier, there's many different proprietary solutions and different SDKs that you need to use, different protocols that you need to master. So at some point, standards like 1M2M or like 1M2M, they're gonna help. But what we need to build the Internet of Things is developers, and developers, they want to have the freedom of using the programming language of their choice and the framework of their choice, just like what we needed and that we have now for the Internet. So how can we make it easier? Well, let's just replicate what has made the good old Internet successful. So how about trying to leverage open stuff? Open hardware. If you guys are building IoT solutions, if you're building server-side infrastructure, I think you need to really make sure that you incorporate in your picture open hardware. You need to make sure that, yes, you may be selling your own hardware, you may be partnering with people that build very ruggedized, very industrial grade sort of hardware, But developers, when they want to try and evaluate your solution, your cloud infrastructure, they don't want to have to talk to a salesperson whatsoever. They don't want to have to write down their email to order some stuff from your website. They want to use an open standard to talk to your server, which hopefully you're going to use. Your server is talking like M2M, and they want to use a device that they have handy, right? Yeah, that's actually, so at the Eclipse Foundation, we are an open source organization, and we reach out to many developers. Historically, Eclipse has been doing IDEs, right, and tools for Java developers. We have a user base of tens of millions of developers. We've asked about 18 months ago, do you guys use open hardware either as a hobby or either in actual real solution? And 18 months ago, it was already a third of those developers who said, yep, open hardware is part of my decision process, if you will, and it's part of my evaluation process. So it's kind of important to look at those platforms. Open standards, of course. I mean, I'm sure you guys are already convinced that we need open standards. Developers, they don't want to have to learn yet another protocol. So that's the kind of standards that we see. And what's more, on top of those standards, there are several initiatives. Some of them have been mentioned already. We could mention Open Daylight as well. The idea is that on top of those open standards, you want to make sure that developers have a place to collaborate among each other, a place to provide and deliver the core building blocks that eventually other developers, including developers building and doing business on top of the technology, are going to be able to reuse. And at the end of the day, it's all about innovation, right? Open source is really there to make sure that people have the freedom to innovate. Again, to Omar's point earlier, you don't know what people are going to build on top of your standards. You want them to have all the tools they need, that is the standards, plus open source implementations, so as they can experiment, so as they can build a crazy website. That's what happened for the internet. So as they can build crazy IoT solution. That's what hopefully is going to happen for IoT. So yeah, they want to reuse, reintegrate, modify, tweak existing technology, and they will innovate by integrating existing bits into their stuff. I think this is actually a study that I really like. So it's coming from a firm called Vision Mobile. They conducted a similar study, I think about a decade ago, about how many mobile developers would be needed for essentially building mobile apps. And yeah, it was the early days of mobile development, and they forecasted whichever million developers. They were essentially wrong by one order of magnitude, because they didn't anticipate that Google would come up with Android and would essentially open source a key part of mobile development. So those same guys, they forecast that by 2020 we're going to need 4.5 million developers. That's even more, maybe. So how do you engage to those developers? How do you make sure that they adopt your standard? They bet and they start using the same technology you are betting on? Well, you need to look at open source, right? A nice example is actually for those of you guys who remember, I mean, there's still solutions based on SOAP, right? But not that many, because at the end of the day, developers made their choice. They were like, yeah, SOAP, it's bloated and it became too complex. We might as well use REST, the REST paradigm, because the standard is better and the ecosystem of available implementations is better as well. And now these are the technologies that basically took off. An actual example for in the realm of IoT, which I think is really making the point of why the standard is important, the open standard, and associated to that open source technology, MQTT. I'm sure many of you guys know MQTT. It's an open standard. It's been for a while. It's been a royalty-free specification for, I think, the last decade or so. But in the early days of the Eclipse IoT working group, which I'm going to speak a bit more in just a minute, IBM, Eurotech, and others, they realized that, yeah, the standard was great, but they needed to actually push even more by providing open source implementations of the standard. And what do we have now? We have way many more people using MQTT, which means a bigger pie. So that is companies like IBM, Eurotech, and others, if at the time they were already convinced that MQTT would be great and they were already putting it at the heart of their solution, now not only do they still do that, but they have an ecosystem of developers which is 10 or 100 times bigger. So at Eclipse we try to do exactly that, exactly what happened for MQTT, but with other standards that we think are relevant, or more specifically that our members, our developers think are important for IoT. So we have an initiative that's been going on for the last 4 or 5 years, and we are essentially a place for companies to collaborate and develop and work together on providing open source software for IoT. So it's now about 20 different open source projects. I mean, the number keeps growing, so I think it's now 21 or 22 actually, 30 plus members, and yeah, we provide building blocks for IoT. So what would that be? That would be implementation of standards like MQTT, CoAP, Lightweight M2M, 1M2M, and the verticals, I would say, that you may want to build on top of those standards. So home automation frameworks, industrial automation frameworks, etc., etc. So yeah, our members include the founding members, IBM, Eurotech, and Sierra Wireless, as well as companies like Bosch, Cisco, Intel, etc. And project-wise, so I said 20, there's hardly, I think, a dozen projects here. But yeah, just to mention a few of them around protocols, we would have Paho, Mosquito for MQTT implementations, Californium, Wakama, Leshan for Lightweight M2M and CoAP implementations. And on top of that, application frameworks like Cora, like Cricket for developing gateway software, tooling like Vorto to have models to specify the capabilities of your devices, generate code, etc., etc. So we are really driven by not only what's happening in the standard bodies, driven by what our members think is important, and what's more, what they think is not a differentiating them, right? When it comes to implementing a protocol stack, you might as well collaborate with your competitors so as you have a rock-solid implementation. So, yeah, we are really we have more than a decade of experience running open source projects. Before the days of Eclipse IoT, the Eclipse Foundation was doing lots of stuff around tools for Java developers and whatnot. So we are a not-for-profit with very clear bylaws stating what it means for companies to come to us and collaborate on open source technology. What does it mean in terms of licenses? What does it mean in terms of sharing the ownership of the project? When it comes to working in open source, you want to make sure that if you're big company A and you want to drive the project in one direction, and big company B is also interested in a project that wants to go in a different direction, you want to make sure that there is a clear process in place, which is what essentially we provide. The tools as well, the collaboration, the tools to collaborate. Open sourcing a project might be as simple as just putting the code there on your project website, but if you really want others to join your initiative, you want to have mailing list in place, and you want to have stuff to automatically build the software and provide the downloads, etc., etc. So that's what we do, and we engage to developers as well. We participate to workshops, conferences, so as people get a chance to evaluate the technology, get a chance to give us feedback, to give feedback to the people who actually run the projects, right? So yeah, historically we talk to the Java developers, if you will, coming from an Eclipse development IDE background, but now we have even more developers interested in IoT and whatnot. So we've been pretty successful so far. If we were to look just at how much code we are gathering at Eclipse, it's getting close to 2 million lines of code. So again, the pie gets bigger, right? The more lightweight M2M implementation or 1M2M implementations there are, and the better they are, the more likely it is that the standard is going to be adopted, and the more likely it is that you will be right in your strategic choice of using such or such standard. So yeah, it's kind of a virtual cycle, right? So yeah, numbers, I think we mentioned most of the members, pretty successful in terms of having diversity in the projects, like on the lightweight M2M front, for example, that would be big companies like Sierra, Bosch, or Zatar working together, and Intel as well. They managed to work together on the actual open source implementation, right? So that's also a huge sign, in my opinion, of success. So yeah, long story short, how can you leverage the open keyword for building your IoT ecosystem? Make sure that you look at IoT standards, because, well, I think pretty much now pretty much everyone is convinced that proprietary protocols are not the way to go, for sure. Open hardware. If you don't have open hardware as part of your strategy one way or the other, you might want to have another look. You want developers to have a hello world to start using the solutions, your products, without having to talk to any sales representative whatsoever. And so yeah, that might involve open hardware. And of course that will involve open source, so you can start using open source, and ideally you start one way or the other to contribute back. There's many ways to get involved. You can, again, use the projects, provide feature requests, share your experience with the project. Not only will you tell the world that the standard you've been using is doing the job, but in combination with open source technology, you've gone even further in the way you've innovated inside your project, right? So please get in touch. This is my contact information. Our main website would be iot.eclipse.org, and we would be happy to have you guys involved one way or the other in using the technology or telling us what you do with it. And with PSL, thank you for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. So now we're going to have Friedhelm Roderman come up. He's an IoT consultant at Vodafone. He's going to talk to us about lightweight machine-to-machine and the low-power wireless alliance. Friedhelm.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Hello, everybody. Okay. So the topic is low power wide area support with lightweight machine-to-machine. Lightweight machine-to-machine is a device management and service enablement protocol developed by the Open Mobile Alliance. We have 1.0 ready and stable. There was another test phase which was successful this week, happening here in San Diego. And obviously we are evolving it further, and the next release will be lightweight machine-to-machine 1.1. And this is the scope. We'll do some firewall traversal improvements, like adding additional transport, TCP transport, in addition to UDP transport, for example. We'll do some security enhancement. We will have the low power wide area support, which I will be explaining a bit deeper. We will add support for the co-op publish subscribe model from the IETF. Furthermore, we will add support for the IETF resource directory, and also planning to introduce HTTP2 and quick support. Adding HTTP2 then will bring lightweight M2M now beyond the constrained domain into a more, let's say, more sophisticated domain. So we will also be able to manage more complex devices. And then finally we have object versioning. So this is the scope. Now moving a bit deeper into low power wide area support. So low power wide area provides connectivity, radio connectivity for IoT devices, which are normally low-cost devices. They have a small hardware and software footprint. They need to have a low energy consumption because many of them will run on battery and are supposed to last for 10 or 15 years. And obviously they are not able to produce much traffic with that, so they are low traffic devices. There are different two categories of technologies. You have technologies in the unlicensed spectrum, like Sigfox and LoRa. And you have also technologies in the licensed spectrum being developed by the 3GPP. One of them is the Interworking IoT. So, and what is Lightweight M2M? Lightweight M2M provides service layer functions for IoT devices. Again, can be low-cost devices with small hardware and software footprint, because lightweight machine-to-machine is very efficient protocol. It can support devices with a low energy consumption, because you can do the management with little traffic. So it looks like this is a very good fit. So the low power wide area devices, what do they need? They need remote device management and service enablement. You want to configure settings to allow the devices to connect to the application server. You may want to update the firmware, the software, and also you need some diagnostic functions to detect the health of the device. And these are like classical device management functions. But in addition, you also need some service enablement functions, or some call it asset management. You want to configure settings to affect the behavior of the device application and manage the data of the application, like retrieving data, retrieving sensor values, or whatever you want to read from the device. So which DM capabilities might be in scope? They are bootstrapping, setting the connectivity parameters, setting the type of data channel being used by the device. For example, with Narrowband IoT, you can choose between IP, non-IP, and SMS. And furthermore, managing the application behavior, communication patterns, frequency of data readings and data reportings, power save mode operations. You may want to remote all these things, to configure all these things from remote. Furthermore, firmware update, which you normally want to limit the usage of the firmware update feature, because it eats quite a lot of battery on these constrained devices, but there may be cases where you can't get around it because there's a possible security problem, and so you want to fix it over the air. Some devices might even require more complex software component management, more fine-grained software component management, and then diagnostics to troubleshoot any issues. For example, do a remote reboot of a device, remote restart, and finally, lock and wipe function, the ability to delete data from case the device is stolen or lost. Yeah, surprise, surprise. Lightweight machine-to-machine can provide this functionality. Obviously, the devices we're talking about are very constrained, very cheap, not much processing power. And so you won't need all of the Lightweight machine-to-machine functionality. You have to pick a subset, which depends on the device type, what you need, and on the use case where you want to use the device. So all in all, you want to have for this device a very thin service layer, which is running over the low power wide area transport. There are some challenges and constraints for an application layer solution running over low power wide area, for example, Narrowband IoT. The data rate for battery constrained devices, you may sometimes only have like 300 bytes a day you can carry. Security, how do we address this? To the application layer, or do we use transport security? or do we use network security? Obviously, we don't want to use several layers of security because every byte counts on the radio interface, so ideally we would only have one layer, at least on the interface between the device and the network. And then varying characteristics of the device, so some may be mobile, some may be static. Some static devices, like a television which gets stolen, may become mobile. So you have to take different characteristics into account of this narrowband IoT or low power wide area devices. And the last point is the integration question, how to integrate these devices, integrate the network side with the application layer side. But I don't think this is a big challenge. It's just that we have to decide how to do this. So don't get me wrong, lightweight and machine as it stands today can already meet the constraints of low power wide area communications, and you can already use it today. However, there's a few things we could do to make it work even better, in particular with 3GPP technologies. For example, narrowband IoT has, in addition to an IP transport and SMS transport, it has also a non-IP transport, and therefore we would need to define that in OMA, how to use lightweight machine-to-machine and core over non-IP. Then we have to look at the security concept. 3GPP SL3 is doing some work here. The IETF is obviously also doing work in the IoT security space. For example, the DICE work, DTLS in constrained environments, you could look at this would be an improvement to the handshake and reduce the bytes being sent over the air. And the third point is that you might want to enhance the device management functions, add some additional functions which could be useful here, for example, for connectivity management, for deciding, for remotely configuring the transport mode, non-IP, IP, or SMS, or for changing the frequency. That could be used for enhancement. And additional point not mentioned here, which was outside the OMA possibly, could also be done inside the OMA, would be to create new objects which support narrowband IoT specific applications. So this would be work which could also be done in the IP Smart Object Alliance. So this is just a high-level architecture. It shows the 3GPP architecture and the lightweight machine-to-machine stack. So on the left-hand side you have the UE, the device, and the right-hand side you have the application server, and then you have the 3GPP network elements in between. Obviously, you could also enhance this and integrate this with a 100M system. So you could have the 100M backend or application server talking via the lightweight machine-to-machine interworking function with the device which has the lightweight machine-to-machine client implemented. So finally, I would like to mention an activity in the GSMA, which is the Narrowband IoT Forum, which has been recently created to influence standardization and foster the adoption and ecosystem for narrowband IoT-based products and services. And here it's worth to notice that the Narrowband IoT Forum is planning the Narrowband IoT Open Labs to support the developer community, which is providing access to narrowband IoT services and networks, and also provides SDKs and other resources to facilitate development, and tries to engage with developers from different industries to foster the development of narrowband IoT based applications. And this Open Labs will be hosted worldwide. I believe Ericsson, whoever, Nokia are already thinking about opening such labs. So that will be also a way of bridge the gap between this new breed of standards and the developer community. So that's a summary of what I've been talking about. Live machine-to-machine offers device and asset management for low power wide area technology and devices. And the OMA started work on further improvements for live machine-to-machine. And obviously anybody is welcome to contribute and support this evolution of live machine-to-machine. And finally, GSMA, Narrowband IoT Forum, supporting the ecosystem building, including the developer support. Thank you.
Thank you, Friedhelm. So now we're going to invite Dr. Antonio Jeja, who's the founder of Hop Ubiquitous, and he's going to talk to us about OMA Lightweight Machine-to-Machine and OMA.API.
Good afternoon, everybody. My target now, after all this presentation about what is going on, what is the standard providing, the next step, mainly here I would like, my target is two. One is show you real implementation of devices right now working with lightweight end-to-end, what is going on in the market, some practical experience from SMEs as we are with these protocols and the kind of opportunities that are arising. And the second point is also raise awareness about GOT API. I think majority of you maybe know, but I would like also to show how OMA GOT API, that is also one of the much more relevant standards, also coming from OMA and synergy a lot in the IoT world, could open new opportunities also for the community and for future development. So, in order to understand, contextualize, and also to put in context, all of us, we are aware about exactly what are the benefits of a standard. We are all aware about what is the benefit of lightweight end-to-end, and it's mainly, and also one end-to-end, and it's mainly because the Internet of Things cannot live without cloud integration, cannot live alone. We need the integration and a set of services that need to be provided to our devices and need to be provided to our application. From the beginning, covering all these needs, it has been what the standards have been developing. In details, what we have required are control, observe when an anomaly happens, alert user system, be able to also discover and scale in a kind autonomous way to new devices, new sensors that are arising, and all this following a common semantic, a common model. One end-to-end, for example, is a good example about how to define common semantics for the service. One and OMA lightweight end-to-end in collaboration also with Ipso Alliance, another standardization, another alliance that we are a member, are also defining the semantics and the development of new objects for lightweight end. So then also it's very important to do that level of integration. All of us, we are pretty aware about what is right now providing OMA. I don't want to go into too much details, but we should recognize that IoT is a trending topic. A lot of alliances, consortia, a lot of people is trying to put their position into the market, but something that OMA can say that not a lot of people can say in the IoT world is that they have the experience. They know what they are doing. They know what is device management. They know what is scalability. They know what means deploy thousands and even millions of devices and support the maintenance. And this same requirement that we are having now with the IoT are something that they already covered 16 years ago, 15 years ago when they started with the device management. So this is a kind of solution that really leverage and support the needs that IoTs are raising. And that is something also I think one end-to-end is doing pretty well. Right? Go into the market, see what is already good there, what is already, and leverage and put it into the ecosystem and just fill the gaps that are covering. So something we should be proud of, we should recognize that the group that we are here together, OMA plus one end-to-end, another association that had liaison with these groups, is that they are not reinventing or they are not branded. They are really building something with a purpose to satisfy a need, not because any brand is behind. And following that approach, that is the reason because we, as I mentioned, we have a set of requirements regarding security, interoperability, device management, information reporting, etc., etc. That majority of them are supported right now for the OMA like end-to-end and for the object data modeling that is the way that the objects are described in like end-to-end protocol. Also, I like this picture. It could be more correct or less correct. I did it already almost 2 years ago when I tried to align, as I mentioned, IETF, OMA, and one end-to-end. Something I like from these three bodies working together or cooperating together is that we are talking about similar stuff. We are in some way integrating different components, one much more in the networking and protocols, another in the service, but at the end of the day, all of them can synergy together without conflicts into a common architecture. So if I should say what's an architecture for IoT, all of us have agreed that our sensors, gateway, and interconnection entities, and finally some cloud in order to provide the management platform, the interconnection platform, and finally to enable the application. And all of them, here we can see how all of them are mapped with a different semantic. And that is also another important point that small companies, new companies arriving to the market when they need to make a choice about what is the proper solution to enable their market can choose OMA and one end-to-end. So it's also something to say. And in particular, if we go into the implementation of all these solutions, in our case, as Hub Ubiquitous, what we have found is these opportunities with the OMA Lightweight end-to-end developer toolkit. When we have, for example, some already developed the skill like Lightweight end-to-end, we found that thanks to the support also from OMA Lightweight end-to-end, we were able to do some lab kits and some referent modules that now also Sierra Wireless, Gemalto, and other companies are supporting with open hardware and with a very interesting approach. We have also, as I will show today, very interesting integration with the mobile application, directly with native apps via RESTful API, but also now about web APIs through web browsers. It's also a huge innovation there about how to integrate mobile world with IoT, because we must be aware that are three worlds going in parallel. The physical world, or the physical devices, or gadgets, wearables, that is there. We have the web world that we could allocate in kind of the everywhere, that is like the transport. And after we need to synergy with two big trends, cloud and mobile. Our solution is not web compatible, mobile friendly and cloud friendly, forget it. And then it's something I feel Open Mobile Alliance is mobile friendly and cloud friendly on this approach. So we are supporting our platform, it's called OMA, for French speaking people means lost, and it's just a game because Hub, OMA, Open Mobile Alliance, is all that board. And this is also integration with the sensors, the mobile integration that I would like to present. As I mentioned, we are an SME, and from the beginning we have very clear that OMA clients should be in sensors. So we developed this kind of cool gadgets that is really 13, 15 millimeter, and this cool gadget that is being used, I will demonstrate it now, that is only the board, 3 centimeters, 1.5 centimeters. I always joke that big people build small things, no? So it's a kind of joke. So we appreciate much more what means size, so then we try to focus on optimized size. So this kind of simple board you can see here in a Zoom has support for IPv4, IPv6, co-op, like end-to-end, and it's magnific that integrating this kind of solution for temperature, humidity, activity monitoring via noise, etc., can be remotely maintained in any kind of ecosystem thanks to use this standard. In addition to this board, I will present now some examples where we are deploying in UK and in other scenarios in real environment. We are really deploying like end-to-end it's part of the message that we want to transfer today. We are really building like end-to-end objects. We are really deploying in Europe like end-to-end objects. We are deploying different formats, very tiny, some tags for beacons, some wearables, some ambient monitors as I was showing, some a little bit bigger for extending for other applications. But at the end of the day, we are deploying technology that makes sense. And here, for example, is a short video that it is a real OMA lightweight end-to-end sensor deployed in a cooperation with Fujitsu in Morrison supermarket in UK. So probably we are one of the first sensors using lightweight end-to-end deployed in a supermarket in Europe. Just an anecdotic point. And the use of this is that thanks to the integration with mobile apps and thanks to the integration with cloud, something so simple like this can detect when, for example, a freezer in a retail, in a shop is falling the temperature and then notify to the staff to make sure they can move the products quickly from one place to another and make sure that they don't have any complaint. So here we can see a simple example about how this works. So we have the mobile app receiving the notification, then we can see the sensor that has notified, and then he can go quickly and check the sensor and the product from one place to another. Very simple application, but we have a lot of challenge to satisfy, like easy to deploy. First challenge, not transversal. You cannot go to a shopping, to a retail, to a supermarket and say, I need a public IPv6. Forget it. I'm sorry. And unfortunately, I'm an SME, I need to pay salaries, and I cannot wait for the deployment of IPv6 to be able to sell my product. So OMA lightweight is IPv4 compatible, it's IPv6 compatible, it's not transversal, you don't need even public IPv4 address, and make you to deploy easily this kind of solutions. That is something that really empower you and give the opportunity to deploy real things beyond what theoretically should be the ideal solution. Similar approach that is for retail. This is also a nice example that we have the product line called Blue and Blue. Blue is because the encapsulation, personalized encapsulation. Blue is because we are using Bluetooth Low Energy. So we have this product line, we saw also a video, that again, when we go to home automation market, to personal market, you should expect that the worst connectivity option that exists in the market is what this customer will choose. So they will have public IP, they will not have probably strength, high broadband communication, or etc., etc., etc. So you need to really be ready for this kind of solution. And here we have some kind of products too, working with OMA lightweight. So we are personalizing products for several companies, doing, for example, water flood monitors to detect water leaks, working with some insurance company, motion sensors that we can personalize, and also some electrovalves to close the loop and make sure that when you detect a flood, it's very cool that you are maybe in Hawaii, now we are near to Hawaii, if we compare it when we are in Spain. It's not good if you say you have a water flood at home, but you can close the water. So that is also the idea about putting an electrovalve. This is another example of products that you go to blueandblue.com, you can purchase, and we are already deploying with some insurance company in Europe, and we have already some proof of concept also with big companies like Allianz working on this kind of solution. Also, again, using OMA lightweight end-to-end. And the benefits that all these tiny devices are using OMA lightweight end-to-end is because we are, in this very tiny chipset, providing all what is required. We are providing all the support for the communication, all the support regarding IoT protocols with CoAP, that is the equivalent to HTTP, all the support for the device management, and now, it's going to be enhanced with a new version, all regarding security, because also security is a key challenge, but indeed it's much more not a real technological challenge, but much more rising awareness of the community as some step of development and deployment that must be taken into account seriously. Beyond that, all what can be introduced in a very embedded and very tiny stack, all the capacity to be able, as I mentioned, to integrate with service application and interoperate without any inconvenience. So at the end, this embedded stack, really tiny, very lightweight, is able to make it very easy to use over there, things like upgrade, remote management, maintenance, all the security for doing the first switch on with the bootstrapping, or the management, and all the capacity to really do interoperability via data modeling based on the standard. And at the end, the most important is to enable this end-to-end capacity from the sensor to the cloud to facilitate the deployment of the solution. I don't want to go too much into details about what is all the primitives enabled by the OMA lightweight end-to-end, but for the webinar, for people who is following up, just to have a reference, all exactly the kind of RESTful API interfaces, how simple it looks like, and the kind of service that is being provided. As I mentioned, mobile-oriented. It's very easy to really interact with a simple mobile phone and be able to commission, do firmware upgrade, do analysis, even in local, in our case, because we are using Bluetooth Low Energy. And this is a native app, but what I want to present as an innovation today is how to do it even without native apps, this kind of commissioning and management. And here is very interesting that in the last year, both the Device Web API Consortium, that I don't know if some of you are aware, but following up the activities from OMA GOT API, the OMA GOT API is in a standard promoted mainly from Japanese companies, about how to make use of different things via mobile phones, but using like APIs that are exposed to the web. So just to show you the architecture and simplify, mainly you have a smartphone. This is the handset. This is a smartphone, and mainly we start like you are used to Java runtime environment. That is an engine common to all the applications and solutions, where you configure here the primitives to use your sensor, in our case Bluetooth Low Energy sensors, and then this expose a local server in the mobile phone. It's like your mobile phone is a server that a web browser using JavaScript can just do local host queries, a RESTful API to local host, because JavaScript runs directly in the smartphone, so just querying your local smartphone, and then be able to provide a lot of functionalities that by default are not enabled in the smartphone. Of course, here you need to provide an additional layer of security with authentication to make sure that only authenticated whitelist webs and authenticated people can access really to your APIs. But imagine how interesting it is that multi-platform, iOS, Android, other different platforms, and the maintenance of adding new devices, how simple it is that when you are ready to add a device like this one, so tiny device, just need to scan a QR code and directly go to a web page that allows you to configure all the OMA lightweight end-to-end parameters to make your device run. So this is the kind of benefits. So an example of a real use case that I want to show is one of the simple markets that we are also addressing. I just put another example just to show different markets, is retail. Something so simple that could be a Bluetooth Low Energy beacon, a small device sending advertisement for retail, where you have the opportunity to interact between the device, a physical place and point of interest, and a consumer. These markets are extremely high potential of development during the coming years, but again, we have the same problem coming again, that is how to make it easy to use and scale. And GOT API plus lightweight end-to-end enable the opportunity that a user, not a user in this case, a manager of a shop in a shopping center just with a smartphone without a native app, just approaching the devices, can configure, update the advertisement without requiring any skill, just to be able to use a smartphone that, thanks to the evolution of the technology, everybody nowadays is able to manage and interact with this technology. So we build this extremely low-cost, simple, lightweight end-to-end beacon that we manufacture, and based on that, we integrated and we did the interaction and the commissioning with the smartphone. So you can play the video, please. So this is a clear example how, using a web browser, you can scan and interact directly with sensors using lightweight end-to-end, and using the lightweight end-to-end API, you can even interact. So the main target of this message is a new way for interacting between Bluetooth Low Energy devices, because it's enabled in the smartphone, via web browser, without a native dedicated app. It's just an engine that is common for all the apps and that you can download directly from the Device Web API consortium. So just approach and interact. A kind of NFC, but really with all the IP connectivity, lightweight end-to-end interface. So we log into OMAR platform with a smartphone, so we have authenticated access. So we go inside the platform to the proximity marketing solution, one of the portfolios that we are enabling. And by default, we can see for our account all the different devices, beacons that we have integrated. So we can see here the device list. In total, for example, for one shop, we have 16 devices. But 16 devices, maybe you don't remember what is next to the main section, children section, entry. And doing this kind of good API capacity, we are able to interact directly between the web browser and the physical device that you have in front of you using lightweight end-to-end. So if we can order them by proximity, then the web browser is able to use the scanner of Bluetooth of the device, and then we can use it. We can see, for example, first is the home base, and then the core, we can see how this affects. So this, as I mentioned, is a common device web API consortium doing this engine and supporting and promoting the OMA God API, also a standard that I recommend you to follow up and consider too. So just in conclusion, what I wanted to show is how Lightweight is really helping us to develop our initial business development in the IoT world, how really these capacities to make easier to use for a consumer market are required, and how even new standards coming from OMA, like God API, is continue this enabling of the IoT and integration with mobile, cloud, and easy to use technology of the mobile world. So thank you so much, and time for the next speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Jera. I can tell you, as the originator of the God API work item in OMA, that work that they're doing is very gratifying. I'm really glad to see it. And all the work that the people over in Japan have been doing with the Device Web API Consortium. So I want to invite up now Sunil Marolia, who's Vice President of Product Management, Smith Micro, who's going to talk to us about taming the IoT beast, one managed object at a time. Sunil?
All right, thank you. Sunil Marolia here. I'm Vice President of Product Management for Smith Micro. I'm going to give you a different perspective today. I don't come necessarily from the CTO office. I come from the product management group, which means I have to take these technology assets and produce revenue with them. So mine is going to be very market oriented and really explain why and how we leverage OMA to our advantage. So a quick overview of Smith Micro for those that haven't heard of us. We're a 30-plus-year-old software company. We're exclusively software. For most of that time, we've been selling white label software into large carriers and OEMs in the telecom space. So most people in this room have probably used our software at some point or another if you've used a wireless network. So what we've found, though, in the last several years is that with the opening of platforms and the adoption of mobile in enterprises, as well as the trends on connecting M2M devices and different verticals, that a lot of technology that we have developed is now very much applicable to those markets. And so it's been a major focus for us for the past year or so. We have a long history with OMA and standards, dating back to 2005. We were one of the pioneers in developing the device management standards, specifically around firmware over the air and the FUMO standards. We've been involved in the OMA API program. Obviously, for those familiar with our legacy in connection management, we've had a hand in some of the connection management API as well. Not necessarily part of OMA, but leveraging the OMA standard was the ANDSF management object framework. We've done a lot of work in that area, helping with some of the Wi-Fi offload and connections across cellular and Wi-Fi, and we continue to have a business in that area, and as well as some of the webinars and things like that that we've supported with OMA. So long history. We've always been a very big advocate of standards, but I think what I want to give you a perspective on is on what the new usage of these standards are. So why OMA? For us, I would kind of break it down into three main categories: execution, planning, and exposure. From an execution perspective, as a software developer, we gain significant time and market advantages. There's robust peer technical review. So, if any of you guys have been in these meetings, I think a lot of you probably have come from workshop meetings this week. You can spend hours dealing with the most smallest, minute details around standards and technology choices. And it's not just one company's opinion, but the opinion of many, many companies with a lot of influence on that. And there's no way that any one company can accomplish that. Nobody has the time, money, or resources to put that level of detail review into any of those things. And we get that from OMA. We get that by being participants, by being members. We walk away with a framework of standards and protocols that we can now go commercialize that have been highly reviewed, and they're ready to go, and we know they're robust. In terms of planning, it gives us an eye into the future, right? So it's really hard out there in the market to figure out, you can talk to many, many customers. Some share information, some don't. Within the standards organizations, we get to peer into what's coming in the future. And not just 6 months, we're looking at the future 2 to 10 years down the road in terms of what's going to be happening, what's going to be important. And so that gives us another good advantage, another way to predict where we need to direct our attention. And finally, exposure. We do a lot of events with OMA, and they give us a lot of exposure, especially as we talk about M2M. There is no one M2M market. There is the world, right? There is the world of medical devices. There's the world of logistics, transportation. These worlds exist with or without the people in this room. They exist. They've always existed, and they continue to evolve. It's hard to get to any of those verticals with a broad focus. So what OMA helps us do is to be able to be found, right? When companies need to connect, when they need to manage their devices, when they need to find solutions, OMA gives us that kind of exposure to be found as an expert in this particular area. And so, we get a lot of visibility from the market in that, and that's something that we value quite a bit. And I'm going to specifically talk about lightweight M2M here. I think, given our history of standards in lightweight M2M, in OMA, a lot of focus has been driven by carriers and OEMs focused on interoperability, making sure that there's no system lock-in, making sure that when operators specify a standard, then all the OEMs can meet that standard. And in a mobile world, when there's a single control point, especially in North America, that works, that makes sense. We're not seeing that kind of demand with lightweight M2M, and I think it stems from the fact that there's no M2M market. There is markets of different verticals and people trying to solve problems. That said, we see a huge value in OMA lightweight M2M beyond interoperability. There are obvious interoperability benefits. They will eventually see the market, but before that happens, we see huge benefits. One, in the extensibility. Given that each vertical has its own unique needs, and as a company that's grown up in the carrier world where each carrier requires different things, we understand the challenges of meeting custom requirements from different customers. The challenge is multiplied in M2M because each vertical really needs its own thing. We cannot build a specific solution for each one. What lightweight M2M does is provide us a management object model that's very extensible. We can easily map whatever customer challenges we see into the same language that's common across the functionality that we need to deliver. It's highly efficient. We still continue to deliver OMA DM solutions for North American operators and OEMs. It's very verbose. It's based off of the first generation. When it comes to M2M, this efficiency that it provides is hugely valuable. Many companies, we're not dealing with operators, we're dealing with the system owners and providers, and they pay for data, so data is a cost for them. So to be able to deliver these types of functions efficiently has a huge ROI for them to be able to eliminate the bandwidth costs that they would normally have to pay for. And this relates to the last point, autonomous device monitoring. Obviously this functionality was put into the standard for this very purpose, but to be able to set rules on devices and let them automate and monitor themselves without having to do all this network data is highly efficient. It allows for scalability. It reduces the bandwidth. And this is, of course, that observe notify functionality that we've added in the standard. So it's really well suited for the types of things we can do. And again, I'm not talking about interoperability here. I'm talking about the benefits of the standard independent of that. So obviously, if you look at lightweight M2M and M2M markets for device management, we've got the standards here. What we deal with primarily is industrial IoT and M2M. So we understand there's a lot of wearables, a lot of experimental new companies coming up. We're looking at verticals that have established businesses that are looking for connectivity, and now with the complexity of their device portfolios and deployments, they're now finding quite a bit of complexity in terms of how they manage these devices. So they're looking for how do we efficiently update our firmware, how do we configure these devices that have so many variables in terms of hardware versions, software versions, components, and dependency management, the ability to do diagnostics, health monitoring, as well as location awareness. That's your bread and butter, IoT. I think we're all familiar with that. But now that we've got the platform and we've got the understanding of the standards, and I've told you about the extensibility, we see a lot of use cases beyond that. As a software company, we're basing management across our portfolio on this new standard. For example, the things that we do in network quality and connection management are all now based off of this new lightweight M2M protocol. We are able to now monitor, improve the connectivity experience. We switched from what we were using legacy OMDM to more lightweight management objects, so we're now able to real-time monitor throughput, dropped calls, network selection. Again, all policies, management objects that are very akin to this one market are now done with lightweight M2M in our company. Consumer behavior analytics. So again, extending well beyond what a traditional M2M market is. We're now engaged with enterprises who want to learn about their consumers a bit more using mobile. And again, given these capabilities, the fact that we can map management objects to any desired trait, we can now extend these platforms to these other markets, so we can look at what consumers are doing from locations visited, dwell time, frequency of visits, the types of apps that are used, and observe patterns, identifying points of interest, etc. So again, for us, the standard itself goes well beyond interoperability. It provides us a very extensible framework on which we can build new markets for the company. And finally, mobile marketing. I think my previous colleague mentioned this one here. Again, we're getting to these devices. We're able to update, provision new rule sets. We're able to change content, upload content, and do that all proactively. So for us, it's a huge benefit. It's not just, again, some of the narrow scope here. It's really taking this framework and looking at where we can extend it, and these are all sort of real cases that we're currently deploying. And I kind of want to end here with a real-world use case. This is more in the traditional M2M arena. So we were approached by a company who's launching services for private jets to do internet and entertainment services. So much like your Go-Go's and stuff, but these guys are focused on the private jet segment. They already had the sort of system design in place. They were looking for a way that they can manage this and monitor and diagnose issues for their NOC. So they actually had an RFP out there. They specified OMDM. We countered, realizing that it was a legacy technology, and also for what they were trying to do, the lightweight M2M was a much better fit for them. So they accepted that. It's a very complex project. It's very custom hardware. There's 4 vendors working on just the hardware and software side of things, and that excludes us. It's a very fragmented hardware implementation, one of a kind, so it's not really an off-the-shelf packaged product you can just give them. What they needed to be able to update the firmware in the devices, and this is a device that's made up of multiple components, and so it really required not just the firmware update, but dependency management across those firmware images, which are multiple in this device. Diagnostics to be able to understand, if there's problems in the air, what's happening with those devices. Typical DM, if you look back a few years, you'd have to continuously ping those devices to understand what's happening. With lightweight M2M, we can now set policies on devices that automatically monitor what's happening on those devices, set specific thresholds for different parameters, and let it tell us on the system end what's happening. So that's hugely advantageous, especially as you scale, to be able to get that information more proactively. So a huge advantage going with this standard versus others. That also applies to event monitoring, as I mentioned, and custom parameter support. So I have down here on the right side, you'll see uplink, downlink frequency, yaw, pitch, roll, compass, gyro data, some of the hardware data, and there's probably well over 150 different parameters that we need to manage and monitor at any specific time, on demand, proactively, etc. And so what we were able to do with lightweight M2M, as I mentioned, is develop a custom set of management objects for them. It's based off the three numbers, as for those that are known, well aware of the standard. And like I said, it maps very well. And it provides us a common language. When you're talking to 4 different vendors who provide different parts of it, it'd be very difficult to go to each one and specify a new API, etc. With the lightweight M2M, it provides us a common language to discuss the different components and their specific needs and what they need to expose to the DM client to support the overall need. And so it really provides not only a great protocol, it provides us a methodology now that we can go and have these discussions at a technical level on paper, and we can do it remotely, etc. So a huge advantage for that. So you see the proposed solution that we're launching with them. It's an adaptive platform based off lightweight M2M object model, very customized management objects, very specific for what this customer is trying to accomplish in their vertical. Observe Notify was a huge selling point for monitoring efficiently. And we did not go with UDP. I know the standard supports UDP CoAP. We went with TCP. We didn't want to go reinvent a lot of the packet reliability and retries that UDP doesn't supply. So in this case, the stack did support TCP, and we went with that. So we've really got the lightweight management object model on top of TCP. We support parameter threshold detection as well, so customer can go and pick out whatever parameters that are supported from a read perspective, set thresholds around them, and be notified if anything goes wrong. So real-world example of how we've taken that standard and applied it into a real-world case. So I want to kind of leave you with that. And this is really just one of the solutions. We've got many more in medical, in transportation, others that really have a very similar need, which is those devices are getting more complicated, their deployments are getting more complicated, and it becomes a non-trivial problem for them to be able to manage this. And so we can walk in, we have a process around how to define management objects, how to apply them, how to work with their integration teams. So it's very seamless, very easy, and we take away that pain point. And we do that with only lightweight M2M. Thank you.
Okay, we're only about 10 minutes behind our schedule, I think. So thank you, Sunil. I appreciate that. So Joaquin Prado is going to come up and talk to us. He's the Director of Technical Programs at the OMA, and he's going to talk to us about the Lightweight Machine-to-Machine Developer Toolkit.
Thank you, Bryan, and good evening to everyone. So I'm going to fly through the next slides. You should be already familiar with Lightweight end-to-end, with OMA, and the things we do, and I will stop in this slide. So as you can see on the left-hand side is today when we produce specifications, we create paper. But the market is consume more digital content. So the presentation I have today is about the journey that the OMA has started in how we can adapt or to meet the developer needs. And that is in a way to try to move from the standards to implementation in a shortened path. So what we have here is exactly the same. Standards is on the left-hand side. It gives you just a PDF for most of the time. But the developers, they have a different type of needs. And you can see there they have hackathons, they have software code, there is forums where they want to put some questions out there, and have test server. So what OMA was thinking, okay, how we can close that gap. And the proposal that we have from OMA is in a pilot. It's called the OMA Developer Toolkit. And specifically, we took lightweight end-to-end as an example for that. And what we are going to see now, this is the toolkit. It's a series of tools that they try to facilitate the adoption of the lightweight end-to-end for the developers. So in a way, what the things we tried to do was to re-engineering the concept of the developers. They use content, digital content. So we go from there and backwards what exactly is the things we have to provide in order for them to take these specifications. So with the 5 tools that has been developed by OMA, some of them are very simple. Web documentation, we're going to see each one of them in detail, technical summaries, client tutorial, GitHub, and you will see how we are using GitHub in this pilot. And as well, we have tools to define objects and to register these objects as well. So if we start with web documentation, the standards is we try to abandon the PDF in this case and we create just web content. It's very easy to search and at the same time allows you to have, you can see on there, although the colors is not very clear, links that they take you directly to discussion forums, takes you to if you have identified any kind of problem with the specifications and you want to raise this, so it will take you to GitHub to provide the problem, and then the OMA developer toolkit with the tools we are going to see. The other thing we have is a quick summary. In a very visual way, try in 5-10 minutes, you can review what exactly is this enabler about. And it's very dynamic, it's using my mouse. The next thing we have done is the developer toolkit. And this is actually a client emulator. It's a Firefox plugin that allows the end users to interact with the messages that are being sent between the client and the server. So it's like a protocol analyzer. It allows you to go there, open each one of the messages, see the content is going to be sent to the server, and then when the server sends a response back, you can see what is exactly the message has been sent. Allows you as well to install, this is the different objects that particular client is able to see, and you will see the different instantiations as well. All of this code is already available. You can download it as a plugin from Firefox, but you can take the software as well from our GitHub pages and contribute to that. The other thing we are doing as well is the use of GitHub. And remember, all this is a pilot. We are not in production yet, and we are doing just trials. So the way we are using GitHub is just a version control. This is something familiar for you. We use a repository as well. Publication. It's very easy once you have all of this in GitHub, send it to publication. And as a collaboration tool. And specifically, we are using it to collect feedback from the developers through GitHub into our specifications. But the other thing we are trying to do now as well, and we are already working on that, we have defined several use cases, is that we want to create the specifications directly in web format, in HTML. But we don't want to expose to the standards engineers to learn HTML or to learn GitHub. So what we are doing is we are having a core engine in Git. We place on top of that online editor, where you go there and it's like a Word document. But all of this is happening in a framework, which is the portal, which allows you very easily to select the documents that you want to create a change request, open the document, start writing directly the change request, and submit it. So all of that is happening, as I say, it's not complete yet, but we are in development. The other things we are doing as well, as I don't need to explain anything about what is objects and resources and lightweight end-to-end, but what we have done is to create an editor. And this editor is allowing you to go, it's online, it's going to be released at the end of this month, or the beginning of February, and allows you to go and create objects. And these objects, later on, you can register with OMA. The server will be available, and the code for this is going to be available as well, so you can take it, you can improve it, and if you want to see some improvements in the server, you can send us your recommendations and suggestions. The other thing we have is, you are familiar with this, Omna is a register. One end-to-end has already registered some of the objects. IBISO has done the registration. And you can see it's in a very simple way that you have all the objects defined by OMA, it will be defined in that range. Objects defined by, for future Now, we don't know exactly what is the future, but we always define this type of ranges on there. And then objects, they are defined for third party, like a one end-to-end, if some other groups, they will be defined on there. And as well, there are the possibility to register private objects. All of this, the register is very simple. You register the objects, you can give us the DDF, the description of the object, and we just place it in these pages and make it available to everyone. So that is the 5 tools developed by OMA, and we have an influence on that. Now we are going to see the other 5 tools, that is what we call the community or the ecosystem. So very quickly, we have the smart objects from IPSO. We have open source from Eclipse Foundation. We have the sandbox for Isla Serva for lightweight end-to-end. And we have as well some lab kit and demo code. Some of them was provided for Antonio from Hope. You saw his presentation before. And then the final one is the community. And we are going to see now a little bit more detail each one of them. IPSO Alliance, I think you are familiar with them. They just define objects, and in this case we have a few registrations in our Omna pages. The next one is about the open source. Eclipse, they took our specifications for lightweight end-to-end, and they developed 2 projects, Leishan and Wakahama. Benjamin was mentioned about that, and they make this code available. Today, this week, we have a test fest going on during the week. A lot of the implementation they have on there has been based in one of these implementation, Leishan and Wakahama. The other thing we have as well from Eclipse, they make available a server, so your client can go and test at any time with the server. In fact, if you are using our simulator, lightweight end-to-end simulator, the Firefox plugin, you can be testing against the server. You can have the ability to select different objects and see exactly what is going on in between the client and the server. The other thing we have as well is a lab kit, and this is just a list of, we don't have real content, we just pointing to other organizations or other groups, and here is where we pointing to, in this case, is embedded products, where they have projects where you can take a particular motherboard or platform, and you just go and install the software they provide. They have different projects, and you can be playing around with that. Tomorrow we have here in this hotel a workshop, and the workshop is that we have Arduino and Sierra Wireless platforms, that we are going to take these platforms and step by step teach to the attendees how to take the platform, install the client, and then open a connection with the server and play with the sensors to read the information. So all this information will be later on embedded into this wiki that we have for a lightweight end-to-end. And here we're exactly the same. We have the demos. This was constructed by Antonio, and this was for the Mobile World Congress, where we have their client talking with a server, and the server it was in the cloud and was provided by information, or was running the server in the laptop, or another case was where the server was running in the handset. All these libraries is available as well if you go to the wiki, and you will see all the information there. You can start playing around with this. And obviously, as a result of the workshop that we are going to have tomorrow, we are going to enhance this information with these other new demos that we have for Sierra Wireless and for Arduino. And the final one is the community, and this is exactly what we try to do tomorrow, is that we bring all these tools, the OMA Developer Toolkit, we take it to the community. Some of these tools are built by the ecosystem. There are companies that they would like to contribute to have like in the case of information now is being, the name of the company is different now, as you know, but they would like to make available this server for testing. And the idea is to provide all these tools to the community and then just listen what exactly are the problems they see, what is the enhancements that they need, and to collect all this feedback that is relevant for the standards, in this case for the protocol itself, through GitHub. This is something that is happening already. In last year, in January, we have a test event in Düsseldorf, and at that time we raised about 8 problem reports. And since then, every week we have been receiving comments from developers about things, issues or clarifications that they need in the specifications. So what we are expecting now is just to go to this community. In this case, it's a meetup community here in San Diego. We have about 55, I think, people coming tomorrow. And we are going to give them 25 boards for Arduino and 25 boards for Sierra Wireless. And we have 2 sessions where we are going to take them step by step on how to use the board, we will provide them as well with the rest of the tools, and then just get the feedback from them and take this feedback through GitHub into the specifications. And that is my final presentation, and that is all the tools together, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Joaquin. So I'd like to invite up Amit Shah. He's Vice President of IoT R&D with Telucent. He's going to talk to us about certifying, securing, and managing things. Thank you.
Thank you. So in last 40 seconds, I heard my name mentioned with 3 different companies. So let me just give you a little bit of history of who I am and why it says Nokia. He said Alcatel-Lucent, and my friend Joaquin said information. So 3 months back, I was working in clinical information, 100 people, and I led a team of 50 developers. In September 15th, we were bought by Alcatel-Lucent, and I became a part of a company which was 53,000. And 2 weeks back, Alcatel-Lucent was finally acquired by Nokia, and now we are a company of 100,000. So I'm still kind of wrap my head around what just happened. And then, of course, the standards and everything. So, one thing I want to talk about is removing barriers to entry. What are the barriers that we as a development community are going to face, which we don't even realize? Yes, standards are great. If we work on the standards, we expect once we implement a standard, tested everything, we are good. But there are a few things that we must keep in mind. And that's the way we're going to achieve something which all of us want to achieve. This slide kind of represents that. It represents that in past we were all about connecting people, and the future is about connecting things. We as human beings, we want to make life easier for ourselves. Even just forget about machines. Look at drive-thrus. They are a perfect example of how we want to make life easy for ourselves. We really do not want to get out of our car, go into McDonald's or wherever, and go and buy things. So we invented drive-thrus. It's all about making life easier. It's all about giving ourselves more time and optimizing business processes. And if you fast forward to today, I was sitting in a forum with some of the in automotive. We want to do the same thing. Something is wrong with the radio in my car. In the old days, I had to drive my car to the shop and have them to connect something to the OBD port and look at what the problem is. Now, what we want to see happen is we want to be able to maybe press a button or not even press a button, have some remote diagnostics, do a diagnosis on the radio, and tell me what the problem is, and send the problem report to the service desk and have them call me, or better still, remotely fix it. So that is where we are going. That's where we see a lot of traction, and that's where we see a lot of people moving in the industry. As a result, there's a lot of growth opportunity. On the left, you see the growth of, in billions, the smart mobile. And on the right, you see, and also you look at the growth rate, it's 6%. But on the right-hand side, you look at, and I'm just looking at, there are so many verticals, but I'm just looking at 4 specific verticals: smart home, smart city, industrial automation, and automotive. There's a lot of opportunity in the new ecosystem and the business models that are emerging. Now, there are 2 scenarios that can go down, right? We're kind of going up. One scenario says that the future is we're going to see a nice hockey stick curve going up. That's one scenario, and that is what we all want to experience. We want to go to those billions of devices, right? But there is also a scenario where the growth is not as steep as we expect. There's a risk. So what can go wrong? What can go wrong is something like this, right? there is a misalignment. I don't know if it really happened, okay? I got this picture, but I don't think things are that bad. There's a misalignment of expectation. There's a misalignment in planning. And finally, there's a misalignment in execution. And we have all seen something like, not this bad, but we've all seen something like this in our own lives where this has happened. So what can happen in our industry? You know, Internet of Things is on the rise, and I call it the Internet of Hack Things. You know, as we see the number of connected devices, you know, growing larger and larger, the value which is extracted from those connected devices is also increasing. And wherever there is increasing value, there is somebody waiting to steal it. That's us, right? We always see that there's somebody waiting to steal it. And there are real examples of this as having happened. You know, 2 years back, smart meters in Spain got compromised, millions of them got compromised. Early last year, we all heard that about 2 million BMWs got hacked. And middle of last year, we also heard that there was a hack in Chrysler. And this was all very preventable. You know, even though the standard was followed, it was very, very preventable. And to the developers, you know, guys, you're one, and in this case, in one of the cases, it was using HTTP in place of HTTPS. So to the developers in this room, you are one mistake away from becoming a national headline. You're one mistake away from being the leading news item on CNN or what have you. So again, we need to make sure that we protect ourselves, we protect you, and you know, I'm going to, as the presentation goes on, I'm going to talk about specifically how we can, as a community, avoid this from happening. Now the question is, why is it happening? You have, and especially when the number of machines are growing, you have so many sources of data, and they are loaded without any, they are unmanaged data stores going over untrusted network. And this is my favorite example. This is what happened to me. In November of last year, I was in Home Depot. I saw this nice lock. You know, they had a little graphic where you download an app on the phone, you take the lock, you put it in the house, connect it to your router, put an app on the phone, and now you can unlock the door from anywhere in the world. Great. Friday evening, you know, one of those compulsive buys, got it, put it in the house, connected it to my router, and now I had app, showed it, made it work. Very impressive. Put it on my kids' phones. Where they said, hey, you know what? You can just go and unlock the door by pressing a button on the app. Fantastic. It was working great. Monday morning, I come to office. I talk to my IT guy. I said, hey, Ray, guess what I did over the weekend? I went and bought a lock from home and I put it in my house. I said, Amit, very good. Let me come to your house. He came to my house on Tuesday. I'm not making this up. This is real. This is exactly what happened. In 45 minutes, he had an app, the same app on his phone, and he could open my house door. This is exact. So, you know, there are a lot of things that this is what can happen if you're not careful, because there's untrusted network, unmanaged data source, and not everybody's tech savvy. How to solve it? I think we all know how to solve it. We all know exactly what we need to solve it. We have done that. You know, we need to make sure that the data source is managed. In other words, your client, your lightweight client, your DM client needs to be bootstrapped. It needs to make sure that the server it's talking to is trusted. You have two-way authentication. You have, you know, PSK or multiple ways of establishing that authentication certificate keys, and then finally you establish an encryption channel, and now you don't have any issues of somebody like my IT guy coming into my house and hacking my door. And of course, you know, standards and best practices. Lightweight M2M is a standard which allows all of these things which could go wrong. The standard allows you to make sure that it doesn't happen, and you need to follow that, and you need to be very diligent in doing so. The thing I want to talk about, the emphasis I want to make in terms of removing the barrier to entry is that you have a standard, you have all the toolkits, you have a lot of things that will allow you to test your implementation, to test your protocol. One thing that we have done, and this started as the company has to work for an information, was we were working with OMA. I think we worked with OMA from all the way back from the days of CP, OMA DM, Photo, FUMO, SCOMO, so on and so forth, and now lightweight M2M. When we were looking at OMA DM and we saw the software conformance toolkit, there were a lot of test cases that were required by the developers to pass in order to get that certification. So we said, you know what? Why don't we just make it available, put it on the server, and anybody can come and test. And we did that. And as a result, what happened was the OEMs would come and test their implementation of a standard. We took it over customers. Our customers were very large network operators, AT&T, Sprint, T-Mobile, to name a few, and we showed them what we could do. And then what happened was, this is where the consumer, i.e. the network, wireless operators, and the guy who produced the device, they came together. And now the network operators mandate that before that device comes onto my network, we want to have it certified by a source. In this case, it was Information, which was now Eclipse and now Nokia. So we created this program which allows that certification to happen. And as a result, what happens is that your client, the stuff that you have built, it gets put into some chipset, which gets put into some model, which is going to go and sit in some smart meter or a car, and eventually that is going to talk to some network. But you're so far removed from that. But we want to make sure that that is tested and certified. And that's what we would like to help, and that's what Joaquin was talking about, contributing to the community. So what we did was we built a server which is available, and it's a very, very simple workflow. What you do is you sign up in the cloud, and it's all secure, based on a secure protocol. You tell us about the thing that you're certifying, some basic information of what that machine is about, what does it do, what kind of objects it has, so on and so forth. We give you access is granted, and you start testing. And you look, and one good thing about this is when you're testing, one of the things we experienced in the lightweight M2M test fest in Düsseldorf was that every time something went wrong, the question was, where's the PCAP file? Where's the PCAP file? I did not even know what that meant. But I told my guys, hey guys, you want to make sure that whenever testing is going on, you should be able to generate a PCAP file so somebody can take it, analyze, and figure out what's going on and what's wrong. Once you've done the test, we go through all the tests which are mandatory for lightweight M2M protocol, and you download the test results, and you can go over it, keep on testing it again till you get all the passes, and finally, you have a certification that it is certified. So that is what we are contributing to, as Nokia, we're contributing back to the OMA community. And you can connect to the link over there, tell us what you're testing, start testing, and the best of all, it's absolutely free. You're most welcome to go there, look at it. I think Joaquin is going to put up on the website so they can, how to get there. It's absolutely free. We have done this for at least 15,000 plus devices. We work with almost every OEM. We work with a lot of companies, a lot of you are in the audience over here. We welcome more of you to come and test it, because again, I want to go back to the statement, we don't want any one of us to become, our mistake to become a national headline. Thank you.
Thank you, Amit. So the last speaker we have is Kenneth Lowe, Solution Sales Manager from Gemalto, Machine-to-Machine Divisions, talks about fast-tracking lightweight machine-to-machine development. Good.
Thank you. If I told you that lightning would strike this room in the next 5 minutes, all of you would be out that door. But if I told you it would strike this room with absolute certainty in the next 5 years, no one would move. M2M is not some radical thing that happened in the last 5 minutes. And many of us have been watching for some time, waiting for the lightning to strike. Now recently, we've seen a lot of new things coming in the marketplace. And these companies have spent a lot of time and a lot of effort and a lot of money to bring these products to market. And this is just a small subset in a single vertical of the market we're looking at. And yet they're struggling because you can only identify a few of these. And they're going to go to market and they're going to wave their hands and they're going to try and get some buzz and get some press. And it's going to get really hard to get anybody to listen. And they've all heard the stories of disruption. And we all want to be Uber and really shake things up or see a market transform like LED light bulbs. And some of us are driven by fear. We're afraid we're going to be the next newspaper publisher trying to sell classified ads. We're afraid that our market's going to evaporate beneath us. We look at the world and we say these claims that billions of devices are coming and we want to be a part of that. And we go and we rush and we create these things. But a lot of us are just connecting and praying, or connecting and hoping is the politically correct version, that there'll be a business behind it, that somebody will want what we've done, and that they're actually going to do something with this thing that we created and managed to connect. And so you get some really ridiculous scenarios. And the press likes to talk about connecting your coffee pot to your refrigerator or automatically ordering milk. And I applaud. I mean, Amazon's come out with Dash. They're doing some innovative things. But it really doesn't stir my emotions. And I don't see that as the promise of M2M and IoT of bringing efficiency and improving the world and helping humanity in big ways. I don't think it's about my coffee pot. So you're probably familiar with Gartner's map of excitement and hype over time and how long it takes to bring technologies to the marketplace. And most of you, I'm sure, are familiar with these terms and can look at where they are on the chart and can think back when cloud was introduced in the early 2000s and how long it took any companies to make any money with cloud and even where that development is today. And we look at M2M, and you think about the carriers and how long they've been trying to develop excitement in the M2M business and what that feeling, that trial of disillusionment probably feels like to a lot of people that have spent a lot of years without seeing as much revenue as was projected. Now, thank goodness we're starting to emerge out of that curve and things are changing. But IoT has hit peak hype. Everybody's talking about it. Most of them don't know what it is or even why it matters, but they're regurgitating the same stories and the same messages, and we're coming into that trial. So now you're thinking this is a really depressing presentation. What point are we going for here? So I'm going to take a story that I really like that's a much more positive one. Now, Nike came out with their Fuel Band, and they were one of the first people to step up and put something in the consumer space. And they did it in a really, really clever way. They had very simple things they were collecting. They wanted to look at steps. They wanted to look at calories burned, estimated based on your age and weight and height and God knows what. And then they combined that into Nike Fuel. So you can compete with your peers and your spouse and friends and whoever else you wanted to. So you had some standard metric. And that was all they did. And they sold me this device for $130 or something like this, and I would get home and I would see that I was below my goal for the day or that my friend was ahead of me, and I would go out and I would run. And it worked, and that's pretty powerful. And then I had kids and it didn't matter, but at the time it was working pretty well. So what was magic about this for me is that Nike was not in the business of putting a thing on my wrist. They're in the business of selling sports gear. And what they were getting from me was what time I ran and how long I ran and how much activity I did. And if I happened to have the other little thing, the Nike Plus insert to my shoe, they would know when I traded shoes. They would know how many miles I put on my shoe or whether I wore my shoes all day or just for a certain time of day to run. This is the information that most businesses' marketing departments will kill for, and we all gave it to Nike for free so that they could know who their customers were. And this is a really powerful model, and you don't need to sell to everyone to take advantage of this kind of an activity. You just need to get the right device into the hands of your customers so that you can understand what they do. This is the emergence of digital services, which is beyond a smartphone, which is beyond a smart device. And this is what we should all have in mind as we're creating products, as we're hacking, as we're connecting things, that there should be a purpose behind what we're doing. Now, I also haven't said Gemalto in this entire presentation, so you probably knew that was coming. So what we bring to the show are building blocks. We make the bricks behind the scenes, and it's an a la carte menu. We make communication devices. We make modules. We make SIM cards. We make a lot of pieces that enable the communication. This particular dev kit has a Java environment on it. You can create a Java applet. You can use a OMA lightweight end-to-end client to connect it upstream. You can connect an Arduino Shield to it, play with your sensors, and then you can take it to market with a terminal or with any other devices that have a Java client, or that would support a Java client. Above that, we have a cloud, our sensor logic platform, that also supports lightweight M2M, and you can connect with our stuff or you can connect with anybody else's stuff. It's one more brick that you can take advantage of. If you're a device maker and you don't want to mess with apps, we have a Wakanda application, open source, that you can take advantage of to build your apps so you can deploy it in our cloud. But you take what you want and you take advantage of what's there to get something to market. And so when you're looking to build a product, you don't have to reinvent the wheel. You don't have to make everything. You can focus on the piece that you're good at and take advantage of the other things that are there. Now, beyond the building blocks, beyond the things that are fun for developers and are fun for hacking, we actually support all these things live in the field. We have platforms for telcos, we have platforms for banks, we have platforms for government to integrate all of these items. And we have people all over the world that can help you not only debug it, test it, and get it working, but also take it to market to your customers and to ours. So what I want you to remember, out of all these things, you're builders. You do stuff. You can't help but build stuff, and you need the tools to build things that are interesting. Most of us are not going out and making our own hammers. We're not making our own saws. Uber didn't go out and say, I need a smartphone before I can disrupt the taxi industry. They said, there's all these tools out there. I'm going to choose the tools that I need to let me build something really cool that solves something really significant. What this means in terms of business is you can get to market faster, you can get to market cheaper, and you can spend your precious time and your precious resources building the part that differentiates you, building the part that makes you really unique in that space. Because you don't want to be one of a whole bunch of things that doesn't stand out. And God forbid you're the last one to the party saying, hey, me too. Because it doesn't matter if you're the best dancer in the room if the room is empty. If you're going to connect stuff in a way that really matters for you and for your customers so you can make a difference with this. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we're going to open up the floor for questions. I think we'd like our speakers to come up, and we're going to arrange the chairs somehow other than up against the wall, I guess. So feel free to come up to the microphone. I have a couple of questions that have been asked over the webinar that I'll also mention. I'll start out with one of those, actually. Okay, there we go. That's good. We can also use this one, and I can just shout. Okay, so the first question I want to ask, thank you everybody for the presentations. It comes from the webinar, and William Miller on the webinar asked the question, if I understood it, why not XMPP, and particularly the IoT XMPP extension protocols that have been recently developed? So give us a very brief, comparative pro and con of the various protocols that are used in the standards, and XMPP in comparison. Any thoughts?
So,
I don't know XMPP. So we know that for the energy markets, it's being used for the energy markets. In ALU, we had some projects pertaining to XMPP. And from one M2M perspective, we think it really doesn't matter. We can use any protocol. So the vision is about any-to-any communications in the IoT. We should be able to bridge any protocol, make a representation of whatever information as resources, and we should consume that in cloud application. The most important thing is the north interface towards cloud application would be a single interface, and anything else is represented as resources, be it XMPP or lightweight M2M or whatever, co-op or whatever. But I don't have a pros and cons analysis of XMPP versus co-op versus lightweight M2M. I don't have.
Okay. Any other thoughts?
I'll take a stab. Do you know XMPP?
A little bit, but I just want to. I just want to elaborate on what Omar said. Actually, so now speaking with my 1M2M architecture German hat on. The way 1M2M is designed, there are what we call protocol bindings. We happen to have 3 now, HTTP, co-op, and MQTT. But, well, if the gentleman thinks that there should absolutely be an XMPP binding, he's welcome to come and work with us on that. That's going to work as well.
Okay. I think a related question may be, I kind of derived this from looking very quickly at a protocol comparison chart I saw for the various protocols. What's the importance of pub-sub mechanisms for IoT within the protocol as compared to above the protocol? That seems to be one of the significant differences. For example, between HTTP, right? It's not inherently pub-sub, where some of the other protocols are.
Yeah, this is working. Again, I'm not a protocol expert, so for the sake that we're all silent up here, I'll comment. But again, I think each application in the real world has sort of an optimized approach, right? Pub-sub, HTTP. For example, in the case I gave in the business jet market, that we chose TCP over UDP, even though we love everything else about the lightweight M protocol. And we also asked ourselves internally, like, why do we exclude that? When we used to do standards, there were so many participants that we had options for X, Y, and Z, and everything in between, which some people would argue, well, that fragments things, but it gives you options, and I think that's especially important in the M2M space where things can be so very specific. In our case, we chose TCP/IP because of the packet retry. We chose it because the platform we were going on was heavy enough. It had a Linux OS. It supports it, and it just made sense. I think multiple protocol support is important, and it's going to be very specific to this particular vertical and application being used and what's required, right? In certain cases, your technical choice comes down to the restraints around that market. In certain cases, it's the memory size, the processor capabilities. It could be the network being used and the environment around that network. It could even be business model related. And so each one's going to choose something different. So I think the point of this is that, kind of what's been repeated here, is that you've got to have flexibility in both standards and the implementation to be able to absorb those, or you're going to have more solutions specific vendors that are going to focus on different areas.
I think the last answer was quite complete, but just a few comments. Is one of the advantages, for example, that right now lightweight M2M has with respect to other publicly subscribed protocol like MQTT, is that we are supporting much more cheaper protocols and transport protocol like UDP. For example, having discussion with telecommunication providers from Spain, big one, if you can imagine. So they say, we are not really aware how costly it is to keep open an MQTT communication, and TCP communication continuously open. This is really costly for us. However, we can reach similar performance with a keep alive message over a UDP transport in Lightweight end-to-end. When we are going to talk about, for example, the XMPP, it's the same. We have present needs and messaging needs. But why we will pay the cost of this protocol, we can reach the same in a much more cost-effective way. And that is the reason for design that we are looking for lightweight and solutions that support properly constrained devices and are running and working, and then we don't need really to reinvent or to continue that way. And follow with the last question, this publish subscribe. It's the same answer. We are looking for solutions that make more effective the energy and the power consumption from the end devices. A publish subscribe architecture means that the device is going to be able to just notify data when something happens, when an anomaly, when an important event happens. Then we can optimize. So for us, independently, we can do it with MQTT, lightweight end-to-end, publish subscribe, co-op publish subscribe, that is right now the same. And then we must support it. And it's not so much relevant about which is exactly the transport protocol. In fact, if we are able to do the same with a much more lighter transport like UDP, much better, because much more cost effective.
Okay. I think I would say as well in answer to that question, you know, the data model that you create, the object model, and the way that you establish triggers for reporting, right, can be independent of the protocol that's used to deliver, right, that data model. So that was in the absence of questions from the floor. I'll follow up with that particular question. What do you see as the role of data models to enable kind of a protocol-independent way of deploying IoT applications, and what tools are available to help developers create applications that are modeled?
Well, I think it's important to have solutions like that end-to-end, where to some extent you have a model at the protocol level, right? The messages are actually carrying some information, but there will always be what I would call brownfield solutions, where you need to model what's already there, right? There's devices already talking Modbus out there and talking whatever existing legacy protocols. So companies like Bosch actually, which they deal with such scenarios on a day-to-day basis. They are working on tools to allow to model more semantics. And so at Eclipse we have a solution called Vodafone, and the idea is to have this way to model the capabilities of devices, and eventually that will be, I guess, mapped to lightweight end-to-end when that's applicable, but when that's not, that allows essentially to bridge legacy devices to more modern solutions. So, yeah, I think tools that allow to model and generate code, generate lightweight end-to-end bindings might have a role. Yeah.
And I would like to add as well, in the OMA Developer Toolkit, we have a way to represent the object model. And this is one of the tools we are about to release next month. And it's a very simple tool. It's just based on the status, take the definition of objects and resources, and allows you to construct any of these objects that then later you can put in the tools and test.
Yeah, I think one of the related questions is that, for example, in the NFV SDN world, representations such as Yang are becoming very popular for the definition of application interfaces for devices that are going to be SDN managed. And similarly, I think we probably need a sort of representation for IoT applications. One other question that came from the webinar was, what do you see as the role of big data in helping to optimize the value of IoT services?
This is Sunil. I'll have a go at that. So I think it's not necessarily, it's a little bit reverse, right? I think IoT helps feed these the big data machines, right? So we're in this space too, and the fact that you now have an object model that you can be defining to be able to feed some of the machine learning, some of the databases, the data management servers out there with new information, not just from, obviously smartphones are a huge market right now, feeding some of that data, but as we deploy these Internet of Things and being able to feed that data, I think, you obviously create these data models and now naturally feed into what can be mined, what can be analyzed and post-processed. So I think it's more an opportunity for this type of communication to be able to feed into these types of databases that can then use machine learning, clustering, etc., to be able to come up with something more actionable. And so I think it, as opposed to sort of the classic management, which you're like looking for faults and things, now you're adding big data, using machine learning to actually come up with actionable insights from that data. So I think they pair very nicely. Not necessarily that they're required together, but they do pair very nicely, like fine wine and cheese.
So we have a question on the floor.
So we've all seen very diverse use cases for IoT and M2M, and everybody has their own favorite use cases, during refrigerator, smartphone, or whatever. So my question is, like, do we maybe the standards in one M2M, Omar also touched on it to the M2M complexity of connecting so many devices together. So do we have some kind of framework, or are we thinking of maybe channeling back some of the work done by communities where we can bring sanity to these use cases and some way of validating a use case, a new business, a restaurant wants to implement a use case. So a way for them to validate their use case before actually investing in the equipment. So do we have something like that, some work being done on that?
You want to take this? So, with my standards hat on, you seem to be talking about validation of business case as opposed to validation of use case. In standards in general, we don't deal so much with business cases. It's something that we put aside. We use use cases and to derive the requirements, and we think that over time, so we have so many use cases that we are working on, and since we are trying to build a multi-service platform, over time, the new requirements that are generated from new use cases will go down. So we think at some point in time, we have so many use cases that we really have all the requirements in, and we have a multi-service platform. And so in general, the validation of the business model, it's the market that will decide.
Yeah, and I would like to add something on that. And I have to be very careful about this because what we are running in OMA is just a pilot, so it's not part of the production. But what we see is when we have placed the tools for the developer toolkit, we are getting feedback from the developers, and in this feedback is bug fixes, things that they believe that it has to be better explained, but we are getting as well some suggestions. It's not in the format, we don't formalize to the community out there to give us use cases, but we are getting some feedback related with that.
So just to add to that, what Joaquin said, so, and also there was a picture, the people who sit on the standards body, we're not sitting in ivory tower, making the standards up. I think all of us are coming from different industries, and all of us, when we come to the standards body, we have a use case or a business case in mind, which we are trying to solve, and we're trying to bring the standard to solve that use case. So, inherently, the standards are based or created based on some business case, or so use case, or even a business case that we as members of the community have come across in our own businesses, and now we want to bring it to the standard to help us solve it. So there is a lot of that is inherent in the standards.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, and the market really drives what's going to be adopted and what's not going to be adopted. But I think kind of reversing that question, which is not, I think that it's the job of the standards to do a good job, not to restrict the use cases through the technology or the standards development, right? It's very important to remain
to build a standard in a way that doesn't force a particular use case or force a certain way of doing things. I think that's really where the elegance of that standard that comes through.
I believe there was one aspect of that question too, which was, what methods or tools are available to help people validate use cases in kind of an emulation development environment before they go to market, which is also important.
So this actually ties a couple of these questions together, because we had a question about the analytics and the big data, and then the use case or the business case, and where does that come from? And in my opinion, we're in something of a new world where we're able to get data that was never accessible before. And this is not just an IT problem. This is a business problem. And the business is not typically very good at knowing in advance what data they want. For decades, we've built enterprise systems, and data goes in, and nobody's happy with the reports that come out, but they can't say what reports they want to get out. And so for decades as well, engineers and developers have learned to use iterative models, to test, to be more agile, to find out what they don't know so they can ask better questions. And so when we come back to the business cases of IoT, IT should be at the table defining strategy. And the business should be saying, this is the question that I need answered. If you can tell me this piece of data, it changes everything about our business. Now go find a way to get that data. And that's a very different process from saying, hey, look, I've got something. Do you want to do something with it? Let me get a lot of it so you can run analytics on it.
I would like to add something. This is a very specific example on the case of lightweight end-to-end. When you put together the tools that are in the lightweight end-to-end developer toolkit, you can develop an object model for a particular system that you want, collect some data, and you can do all of this with the tools where you define the objects and then connect these to the client simulator in the Firefox plugin and experiment how is the server and client interaction, and without actually doing any development. It's a very specific, it's narrowed down already in the case of lightweight end-to-end, but this is the kind of things that the tools that they are available, they allow you to do.
Okay, cool. Question from the floor.
Okay. Maybe I'm changing a little bit subject, but the topic is the following. If I look at what is the business value of IoT, it seems that we are spending a lot of time on platforms, connectivity, protocol, which barely together are 14%, 12% the value of the pie. The big value is in application development, is in service and integration, which probably covers 70% of the overall value. That's at least the current. And currently we are struggling in a pie which is big like that due to a fight on protocols platform, while the overall pie probably today can be bigger like that if we don't have this fight. So I make a sentence and then I'd like to hear how much you can agree or disagree with that. For me, Internet of Things is when you are able to share information with someone who is talking a different language, is using a different protocol, is a different data model, but you are still capable to talk with him, to share information, to send comment, receive data. How much do you agree or disagree with that?
Yeah, I'll start here. I'm sure there's other comments here, but I agree with you. We're dealing with the 20%. To get to that 70%, somebody has to deal with 20%. So none of us individually want to invest our own time individually for the 20%, which is the beauty of the standards, right? We all share that cost now. We all share that cost. We get huge value because it has to be still done in order to get to 70%. So from my company's perspective, it's that we together are going to share in the difficult work to get to the 3% so that we can all innovate and benefit from the 70% that we're going after. So that's where the 70% is my proprietary company stuff. The 20% is what we're sharing here. It's difficult work, But to get to that 70%, you've got to do the 20%. I think that's why we do this.
I think Enrico wants also to speak about if you open, so every single day you see an announcement for yet another organization which will do yet another protocol or yet another platform for the Internet of Things. That's the problem, and I think what he says, it's not worthwhile having that fight, my approach versus your approach, because we have to get this done, and the value, the real value, so let's converge and the real value in the apps afterwards. I think this is his point, and I fully agree and share with this point.
I think that the answers come from the nature of the human being. That is ego. And everybody likes to have their own house, their own platform, their own standard and leader of some technology. When we talk about open internet consortium, one brand will come to our head. We are talking about all join, all see, another 2 or 3 brands will come to our head. When we talk about one end-to-end POMA, we are lucky, not specific brands are coming to our head, and that is the reason, because personally, me, as a small company, I am here, because in other organizations, in other bodies, me as a small company cannot have voice, however today I have voice, because no specific brands are behind this, a lot of brands, not a specific brand. So I think it's an ego issue, and then also it's a way to make time. If you are telling that 70% of the market is about application development, I agree with you. But at the same time, I should recognize that the market is not ready. At least in Europe, my experience that the market is yet waiting or getting mature. So it's also a good mechanism to get enablers and get strength faced to afford the opportunities are arising. So it's on the one hand marketing, ego, or some brands that they want to have their own house, their own castle. It's not really a technical requirement that they forced to justify, but it's not really a technical requirement. And the other is because we need to get ready for what we expect will happen. If the market is already here, believe me, I am the first one that will be developing market much more than developing a standard. But because the market is coming slowly, it's giving us also the opportunity to improve and enrich of the solution. And the final comment is also agree with him, because even when it's at 20 or 70 or whatever percent, someone must do it. So we must do it in some way too.
No, what I'm saying was slightly different, that the value of what we are doing is today 14% of the value of the things, because when I deploy, for example, a solution like you're doing, a service provider, I gain much more money in integration and application development rather than what is the value of the connectivity platform. That's the great part. The problem is that all this fragmentation, I still have this market not growing. So I have a bigger piece of a small pie, but sometimes it's better to have a small piece of a very large pie. That is a little bit of a mess.
I think an aspect of that is that perhaps the platform is not yet mature. Perhaps there's still a lot that, a lot of the storming phase of development. I'd like to ask though, so given that we have developers who want to get engaged, given that we have open source projects that are focused on IoT, such as I mentioned Open Daylight earlier, right? What do you see as the really big opportunities for developers to get engaged in open source? Where can they gain the most value in getting involved in this? Is it at the devices, focused on creating and programming new devices, or is it helping to build the network a layer of the 1M2M model, or the service layer, or the applications? Where should developers focus their energies, and what can they use? Where can they get engaged to do that?
I think that I liked, for example, Gemalto presentation. Here, all of us, majority of us, at the beginning we were building blocks. And developers, what must do is don't worry about these building blocks, make use of them, and really address the opportunity in the market that they find. And they find that it's a good opportunity for a healthcare solution, that they know the opportunity in the market, go ahead and develop it. So it's not really about device, application, platform, it's much more a solution that they need to find. And here, what we provide is a set of enablers that and building blocks that they will enable to go into the market. And thanks to use this enabler will happen that if they are successful and they grow up, they will call to a telecommunication provider because they need connectivity, and they will be able to offer something really good that scale, that perform, that interoperate, and then is the opportunity for them of using these standards when they really go into a market. So my message to developers is look out for the business opportunity, for the real need, and use us as the building blocks to make easier that path to go to the market.
There's an old joke that says it's really hard to get a battleship to turn on short notice. But once you get it to turn, you have a battleship. And companies have a role in advancing these things, and developers and open source have a role in developing these things. And I think they complement each other, because you're not going to have an open source cellular LTE network in any country. But the standards that allow you to go across one border from another were set by a standards body. And it's almost like a game of leapfrog, one going over the other, and I think they work together. You don't have that leapfrog with one person.
And just to make it clear, I think IoT is not so different from IT as we've been doing it for decades. We're talking about connecting computers with each other, right? So where do developers can get involved for the specificities of IoT? Well, that is taking the existing portfolio of technologies and standards available and map that to the constraints of IoT. So yes, devices, mapping existing technologies so as they are power and battery efficient. On the server side, big data has been around for several years now, but how do we make big data IoT specific? So there might be new technologies to develop, existing open source technology to adapt, etc., etc. So yeah, I mean, developers have lots of room to get involved with IoT for sure.
Okay, so I'm being told that we need to wrap up so we can get to the beer or milk or whatever. One last quick question, and then please socialize out there and consume.
Yeah, this is quite slightly related to the previous question. Is this board kind of doing anything to learn lessons from other similar patterns? Like, for example, he was quite quoting about the networking world, right? So initially there was all the companies like Cisco and the big few of their friends got together and started this open daylight stuff, right? And that was the only one which was there, and people were so eager. Developers were, downloading that kit and so on. It became very popular. And then because Cisco was pushing its agenda, though it was called an open daylight forum, one company was kind of pushing its agenda, right? And then what happened was then like a few other companies like Alcatel, Lucent, those again got together and opened something new. I think it's ONOS or something, right? So there are such things that can happen if there is no proper governance. Like one company trying to push its ideology or its even though they call under the umbrella of open stuff, they try to push their agenda. And are we learning lessons from such in other verticals, which is you can see right away in networking, right, which is happening. Everything is called open, but then
who here programs in C#? It's not the full audience, even though Microsoft had huge authority in the space and could push a lot of weight behind it, but it didn't resonate for whatever reason. And I think that's a big part of it. If developers get on board, like the RESTful discussion, who wants to go interface with anything but a RESTful interface now? And so I think you can spend hundreds of millions of dollars in marketing, but if the guys who are building stuff say, meh, it doesn't go anywhere, is my opinion.
I would say come to the Open Networking Summit in Santa Clara in March. You'll find out the state of Open Daylight, ONOS, and Open Contrail, and all the solutions that are out there. I think they're actually developing quite well, and it's very collaborative and broad at this point.
I'm not sure if we've learned from other industries, but I've been a member of OMA for a long time, and I feel at this point we've shaken out a lot of the personal interests of companies. The people who are here left have a genuine interest in moving these types of things forward. I honestly believe that. So actually we're at a really good sort of crossroads. I will also say that I think if I look down the row here, which I recognize a lot of folks, a lot of us came from telecom and the old OMA world of carrier, device OEM, and I think it would probably do us some good to go beyond those means. I think we're doing the right work, but maybe we're not getting the exposure we need to the people who matter nowadays, which goes well beyond that. And so I'll kind of leave it with that, which is to say, I think you've got the right crowd here. I think you've got what's left over here is the good shakeout of genuine people who are forwarding the right technologies. I'm witness to it. My company adopts them and uses them profitably. But I do think that the market is not just within this small group. I think we all need to kind of expand our horizons, and I think it would do a tremendous amount of good. So I'll leave it with that.
Okay, well, thank you all.